CD7. They negotiate a series of sandstone outcrops and step slowly through a blind natural alley between two rock walls. They come to a clearing of quartzite the size of half a football field, and the silver moon reflects in pools of water collected in eroded holes the size of wagon wheels. The clearing blends into a scree slope that runs down to a thick patch of floppy billygoat plum trees and little gooseberry trees, through which they have to battle hard with Bert in full swing. Brute wandering. Always Molly breaking the silences. High on another outcrop, she sees a dark, black-brown bird in the sky. "Wedge-tailed eagle!" Molly rejoices. The glorious bird circling in the thermal updrafts of its own shimmering sky. That heavenly wingspan looks as wide to Molly as some cars. It's not even flapping its wings, Molly tells herself. It's floating. It's levitating. The bird is magic up there in its sky territory, where it circles now, beneath a cloud shaped like a domed castle. And there it is home, and there it is queen. "She's the queen," Molly says. "Her Majesty!" She calls to the sky, waving in the same way she might wave at a royal from the mother country. She breathes deep and beams. "She's just like us, Greta," Molly says. "She's free." Molly nods. "Yep, this is full life living, Greta. This is how we're supposed to be living." "I can think of several other ways I'd prefer to be living," Greta says, "and I'm holding a glass in every one of them." "I mean, this is what we're supposed to be doing with our lives, isn't it?" Molly replies. "We're supposed to find ourselves things to etch on our gravestones, and now we're writing our own epitaphs, Greta. You're writing yours, I'm writing mine." Greta can see her grave now. "She was the next Greta Garbo," she says, "but she died prematurely from prolonged exposure to the sun and girls who talk to the sky. The Palmerston Players closed their theatre 2 days later out of respect, and also due to the fact that its troupe numbers were cut by a third upon Miss Mays's untimely demise." "I'll always remember this long walk with you, Greta," Molly says. "That's good, Molly," Greta says, "because if we don't find your grandfather's silver road, this may be the last walk you'll have to remember." A spring-fed forest of monsoon palms thins out briefly to reveal a wide bed of sandstone rising to a wave-shaped overhang that is blocking the wind, and prompts Greta to stop and suggest they sleep before they set off on a day of sunlit wandering. She sits down between a large boulder and the overhang, drops her head to her knees. But Molly still stands, because she is struck by the outline of an unusual rock formation on top of the overhang. A red sandstone block that has been weathered into the rough and jagged shape of a human face, albeit one with square-shaped eyebrows and a diamond-shaped nose and a dusty crease for a half-smile. A face, the hard face of a man, worked by water and wind and ancient friction and the rising and falling of seas and the landmass that holds Australia's greatest mystery, the time trapped inside all that is moving and all that is still. And this face is alive to Molly in the moonglow, as if it might turn and look down at her and tell her that it is bad manners to stare so hard at your elders. "I'll be back soon," Molly says. She rushes around the base of the rock. "Where are you going?" Greta shouts after her, confused. Molly doesn't even hear the question because she's focusing on her footing in the dark as she clambers over boulders and scree and lifts herself up onto the shelves and ledges. Greta stands, concerned now, and tries to follow Molly's footsteps with her eyes, but the girl has disappeared into the dark, scampering quickly around the corner of a sloping stone shoulder that rises to the top of the wave-shaped overhang that supports the formation that contains the face of a man. "Molly!" Greta calls, but the gravedigger girl is too quick. And now, the gravedigger girl is gone. Small scree rocks sliding beneath her boots. At this hour, so close to dawn, everything is a shimmering blue in Molly's eyes. She approaches the overhang from a sharp rubble slope that runs down its back like a spine. It's so sheer that she has to fall to her hands and knees to crawl up it, her fingers tingling with flurries of fright whenever she loses her grip on the shifting stones. The flat top of the overhang is small in comparison to the plateaus she's seen so far today in the deep country, but it's still big enough to drop a small house on, or Dottie Drake's hair salon, or Bert Green's lolly shop. The lolly shop. What she wouldn't give for a tall glass of sarsaparilla. What she wouldn't give for a green and red apple-flavoured all-day sucker. She approaches the strange rock formation from behind, and then she shivers in the blue moonlight when she realises the carved face is performing a miraculous balancing act, somehow leaning forward with all its weight on a single small slab of ancient rock. A full human face of rock resting on only 1/3 of a neck. The formation should, by the natural rules of gravity, have plummeted off the overhang 1,000 years ago. But it stays in place, leaning forward to say to Molly that it's trying to look at something, that it's trying so hard to see something. But Sandstone eyes can't see, so the face will stay right here in this precarious place until those eyes turn to the colour of the sky and they can see for miles, like Molly Hook. She runs her hand over the diamond-shaped nose and the remarkable crease that looks like the valley where an upper and bottom lip meet. And she runs her hands over the eyes that cannot see, and she sees someone she knows, someone she longs to see. "Dad," she whispers, and Walt Whitman reminds her of the deathless death. "I know I am deathless." "Missing me one place, search another," she says. "I stop, somewhere waiting for you." And she sees her father's deep eyes, the overhang of his sorrow, the rubble of his past, the jagged edges of his weaknesses, the dusty lips of his regret. Her father sits with Old Man Rock now, she tells herself. Horace Hook and the maker of mountains, she tells herself, trying to make sense of what happened here on Earth, trying to understand the making of men like Aubrey Hook. Sam says he can ask Old Man Rock anything, and he always receives a correct answer. "Where is the Silver Road?" Molly whispers, and she finds her answer in those deep, sandstone eyes. She follows the gaze of the rock face, and she walks to the edge of the overhang, so close that she could fall to her death with a careless misstep. And she leans her head down like the rock face does, and she can see what the rock face cannot see. A still, freshwater lake lit by the moon. And from the edge of this lake runs a twisting path that shimmers like it's made of stardust. A crystal glass snake winding through darkened monsoon forest. And as she stands there, the sun wakes up, and the first rising slice of its light meets the glowing of the moon, and the Silver Road sparkles like a luminous diamond necklace, unfastened and endless, dropped in the deep country, bending and curving and cutting through the forest. A magic road for those with the kind of eyes that can see it, twisting and turning towards the silver horizon, towards the gold, towards the treasure, towards Longcoat Bob. "Greta!" Molly shouts, and the name echoes across the deep country. The Admiral's Frock. An olive-coloured Model A Ford pulls over to the side of a thin red dirt road, lined with orange-flowered honeysuckle trees. Aubrey Hook yanks hard on the Ford's handbrake, and the action makes the wound in his left shoulder howl with blinding pain. He slowly unbuttons his work shirt. The dried yellow-white pus of the bite wound has stuck hard to the fabric of his shirt. He pulls on his sleeve, tearing away the pus-rimmed scabbing that has built up around the edge. Only hate could have caused such a wound, he tells himself. Only hate could turn a man into a dingo like that. Turn his younger brother, Horace, into a wild dog who could bite the flesh from his own brother's shoulder. He gets out of the car and assesses the damage to his shoulder in the car's side mirror. An infected mess of pus and blood. His brother's teeth were rotting like his own. There are white-bellied mangrove snakes sliding along the mud-lined creeks beyond those honeysuckle trees, and they spend their days eating dead mud crabs and poison-bellied toads, and they still have fangs less infectious than Horace Hook's pearly blacks. He looks at the wound, and all he sees in the side mirror is the gravedigger girl and her miserable story, and the series of miserable events that placed his brother beneath that Japanese bomb that removed his body so inconveniently from his left leg. Not a hook at all, he tells himself. The girl is a berry through and through. He buttons his shirt and walks along the dirt road. On the right side of the road, he drops his head to follow two parallel wheel tracks that run down an incline to his own red utility truck, which sits, abandoned, with its front bonnet crumpled hard against a cluster of stringy-bark trees. The truck's windows are wide open, and, on the driver's side, it appears that something smashed into the vehicle. Aubrey retraces his steps and paces back along the road, past his parked automobile, to a series of skid marks bending and curving across the damp dirt road. Then, back further along the road, a series of animal footprints running from one side of the road to the other. He turns to the roadside trees and scrublands that wall a fertile woodland stretching to the sea in the far distance. Not the prints of horses. These hoofprints are too widely spaced for cows. These animals had agility. Buffalo, he tells himself, and he ponders the grave misfortune of the actress and the gravedigger girl. Imagine living with that kind of luck, he tells himself, to be cursed with such black fortune that your vehicle is run off the road by a panicked herd of Northern Territory water buffalo. That's a Tom Berry kind of luck, he thinks. That's a Berry family kind of misfortune. "What are the chances?" Tom Berry rejoiced, spilling his beer on the unvarnished wooden floors of the Hotel Darwin's public bar. "There I was, thinking I was the unluckiest son of a bitch to ever hold a pickaxe, and then I look up and see this barefoot black fella dressed like frickin' Napoleon." Aubrey restarts the Ford on the side of the dirt road and motors on at a pace not much quicker than he could walk if his body wasn't so broken. He remembers the smile on Tom's face, the sheer wonder of it all, the sheer good fortune. There must have been 20 or so local gold miners in the bar that afternoon, and Aubrey Hook was one of the youngest. The men were celebrating the miraculous return of Tom Berry, who had gone missing 3 months earlier while prospecting alone in the rocky tablelands far beyond the Clyde River. Tom bought 3 rounds of whiskey for every man present, and then, to a chorus of rowdy hoots and hollers, he told the extraordinary and seemingly implausible story of the 3 months he was missing in the deep country. For several days, he recounted, he'd made progress on a quartzite seam in a location he was careful not to disclose. There he lived on beans and whiskey, and he spoke of the seam's potential only to his pack horse of 12 long years, Samson. Tom told his horse how he would be returning home a rich man, and that his beloved wife, Bonnie Berry, and his beloved children, then teenaged Violet and Peter Berry, would be waiting for him, and he would tell them to pack up their things quick smart because they were moving to Sydney, because Tom was getting out of the gold-digging business and getting into the caviar scooping business, because their ship had just come in on waves of raw gold. He told Samson how he would then march on down to Smith Street, Darwin, and find every last smug gold miner in every last dark corner of every last pub in town. Every man who had ever laughed about his gold-digging abilities. Every man who'd ever said he had more book sense than gold sense. Every man who'd ever said there was more twinkle in Tom Berry's eyes than there ever was in his pan. And he would gather these men together, and he would glow like gold itself when he told them of his riches. Then, hacking away at the quartzite seam, Tom noticed a rash across the underside of his left forearm, and that rash began to spread across his whole left side. He worked on with his axe and rock hammer, but soon he began to cough uncontrollably, and his chest began to wheeze, and he could not suck enough air into his lungs. In a fevered sweat, he wisely chose to pack his tools and provisions, and he climbed onto Samson and steered the faithful horse towards Darwin, where Tom Berry would see a doctor for what he was convinced was a deadly case of influenza. But soon his limbs grew so weak he could not stay upright on his horse, and he rode for 3 miles on his belly with his dead arms hugging Samson's side. With little instruction, the horse walked aimlessly through the deep country scrub, then took a path high into the plateau lands. It chewed on grasses by the sides of paths, and when it came to a choice of routes, it simply based its choice on the quality of grass each one had to offer. The horse clopped along for 10 miles, through treacherous mountain country, until it came to a wild, fast-flowing river that led to a thunderous waterfall down below that Tom was only just lucid enough to register in his ears. Samson stopped at a bridge crossing the rapids, but it was no bridge made of nail and hardwood, Tom Berry whispered to his transfixed audience in the public bar. It was a bridge made by the blackfellas. You see, a few thin logs that felt like twigs to a pack horse. Samson refused to go any further. Tom Berry slid from the horse and landed in a mess of arms and legs on the dirt and stone edge of the rapids. He could no longer walk, as his legs were paralysed. Half his face was paralysed too. The whole left side was numb and sagging so much that he felt it was going to drop clean off his head. With his face pressed against the earth and his dry tongue licking dust, he tried to drag himself towards the bridge, and he moved a couple of yards, but he was spent altogether when he got within an arm's reach of the bridge. He closed his eyes, and he slowed his breathing, and he regretted the fact that he lacked the strength to throw himself into the rapids, where he could die quickly, smashing his head against a rock, or being sucked down into the waterfall and sprayed off a cliff top, and then drowned soon enough in pounding whitewash. Instead, he would die slowly of thirst in the dirt beneath the baking northern Australian sun. He thought in that moment of how there was a time in his life when he'd intended to put his brain to better use than swinging a sharp axe at rock faces he was always too proud to admit were barren. He had planned to be a schoolteacher. A local priest, Duncan Hall, in Palmerston, had been starting up a small Catholic school, largely for the children of mining families, and he'd asked Tom if he would teach the kids grammar and rhetoric, given he was such a keen and well-spoken advocate for the wonders of literature. But Tom had turned the priest down because he carried a weakness inside him, and that weakness glowed between cracks of grey rock like a fire, and that fire lit his soul. He then thought of his wife, Bonnie, and his son, Peter, who was a quiet and good boy, and his daughter, Violet, and how it made sense that such a fine woman as Bonnie would raise such a fine young woman as Violet. A voracious reader of books like her father. She'd been eating up his poetry books. She'd recite lines to her father over breakfast, and her oats would go cold because she was so lost in the words of Byron and Wordsworth and Whitman. but the glow of the gold blinded him to all that. The glow saw him work too much on rock faces, and then it saw him drink too much, because the drink kept lethargy away from the rock face, kept him working too much. Now the miner turned over and stared into a different golden glow, and that was the full sun, and he willed it to set him alight, to burn his gold-lusting soul to ash. But then I heard Samson holler out with a neigh like he was startled by something. Tom Berry told the wide-mouthed whiskey drinkers at the bar. And I felt footsteps coming towards me in the dirt, and I could not even move my head, gentlemen, because I was so weak. But I could move my eyes, and I turned my eyes to the footsteps in the dirt, and then a figure stood over me. Tom Berry paused for effect in the telling of his great tale, and he lowered his voice. The figure of a man. And this man blocked out the sun, and all I could see was his coat. His long, black, feckin' coat. A French admiral's frock coat. Calls of balderdash and bunkum and bullshit echoed across the beer-stained pub floor, but Tom Berry stood adamantly by his story. Longcoat Bob was old and tall. He was shirtless under the coat, but his long, thin legs wore brown riding pants. There was scarring across his chest, like the staff lines on the piano music sheets Bonnie Berry played from after dinner. He had a mess of curled silver hair, and he had creases so deep in his long, thin face that the creases looked like battle scars. He wore the French admiral's frock coat as naturally as a white man wears a vest. It was made of military-grade navy blue wool, with gold buttons and elaborate gold embroidery on the lapels and cuffs. The collar was so high and stiff it brushed against Bob's earlobes. But the coat was no museum piece. It looked like the old man had worn it for decades, as it was torn at the elbows and covered in dust. It was the real thing, too, Tom said, and men laughed and spat beer from their lips as they slapped their thighs. I speak the truth, Tom gasped. That coat had made its way from them Napoleonic wars all the way to that bloke Bob up in those mountains. Tom's audience was sceptical. You went mad up there in those mountains, Berry, called Albert Strudwick, a seasoned digger from South Australia. Tell me how a black fella all the way up there comes by a coat sewn by the French Empire. Tom knocked back a small glass of whiskey and followed it with a swig of beer. Well, there's something you need to know about this fella Longcoat Bob, Tom said. He's not like other blackfellas. Tom then recounted how he dropped out of consciousness at Longcoat Bob's feet, because the vision of the strange Aboriginal had felt like a dream, and there was little else he could do with his life at that point except slip away into that dream. He woke 2 days later inside a small hut with supports made of tree branches and walls made of rusting corrugated iron. The hut smelled of eucalyptus oil. His neck was throbbing, but he was no longer suffering the flu symptoms that had left him near dead by the rapids crossing. He ran his fingers across the back of his neck and felt a hole in the soft flesh behind his right ear. The hole was filled with a paste that smelled like piss and old grass. Then an Aboriginal woman entered the hut. She said her name was Little Des, daughter of an older woman named Big Desiree, and she wore an old grey linen shirt, and she spoke in her people's native tongue as well as English, and told the lost gold miner just how fortunate he was to have been found by the extraordinary man they called Longcoat Bob, who had brought Tom Berry back to his camp and identified the paralysis tick the size of a peppercorn that had burrowed into the back of his skull and was digging a tunnel out of feasted human flesh that was about to break through the soft and juicy wall of his brain. At the same time as it was gorging itself on his insides, the tick was filling Tom Berry's head with poison. Longcoat Bob had drowned the tick in wet tobacco ashes, then dug it out with a burnt knife tip. He filled the hole it had left with a healing paste made out of emu bush, tea tree oil, mashed moth larvae, and one more secret ingredient that little Des said he refused to disclose to tribe members in order to maintain his superior air of medicinal mystery. "What are you doing wandering about out here?" little Des asked. And Tom told little Des about his shameful lust for gold and how he had found a promising quartzite seam, maybe 20 miles from Longcoat Bob's camp, and he had hoped he would return to Darwin a wealthy man who could provide for his beloved family. Stepping out of the hut later, Tom smiled wide at what was a small tribal camp of huts and fire pits spread across a clearing fringed by stringy bark trees and lush cycad bushes with 10-foot-tall stems. A trio of shy young women approached him with paperbark plates filled with boiled goose eggs and freshly cooked fish and freshwater eel. He found Samson in a shaded corner of the camp, joyfully slurping from a bucket of water next to a mountain of collected grass and bush apples. Longcoat Bob subsequently ordered Tom to eat 14 billygoat plums each day for a week to fight off infection. And soon Tom's strength was restored. But he did not rush to climb onto Samson and clip-clop his way back to Darwin. He had developed a fondness for Longcoat Bob's people, and they had developed a fondness for him. Longcoat Bob enjoyed sitting by the fire at night, telling the wayward traveller stories of how the land around him came to be. And in thanks for those stories, Tom Berry recited descriptions of landscapes penned by famous English poets. Then Tom Berry told Longcoat Bob the story of his life. He told him of his love of the written word, from which he had been distracted by the glowing of gold. He spoke of how hard he had toiled for nothing, and the terrible cost of that fruitless toil to his wife and children, and how every gold-empty rock and cave and dugout he ever climbed down into was another reason to feel bitter and angry at the spinning earth. But, alas, he had felt like a changed man sitting by the fire with Longcoat Bob. He'd come to the deep country to dig up a gold lease, he said, but he'd dug up a new lease on his own life. Were he to strike a gold run of any significance now, he told Longcoat Bob, he would return the grace shown to him by God and Longcoat Bob in those recent days by creating a school where Darwin's children of all colours and creeds and religions could study both the wonders of the written word and the wonders of Longcoat Bob's creation stories. And Longcoat Bob stared at the gold miner across the fire, and he stood and he moved closer to Tom Berry, and he reached a long arm out and pointed at Tom's chest. "Good heart, Tom Berry," he said, tapping Tom's chest twice. "Good heart." Then Longcoat Bob turned towards the forest. "I must talk to the stars for a moment," he said, and he disappeared into the night. The next evening, before sunset, Longcoat Bob met Tom at his hut. "Sunrise tomorrow. Tom Berry and Bob go for a long walk," Longcoat Bob said. "And that surely was a long walk, my friends," Tom Berry said to his audience. "We walked for 6 days. The land was Longcoat Bob's kitchen. He turned grubs into fire-cooked delicacies. He reached his hands into rivers, and long-necked turtles seemed to come to him willingly. And that land he showed me, my friends, was like no land I had ever seen. He led me through the most treacherous and deep country. He took me through ancient galleries and across crocodile-infested waterholes and through cave systems that felt like portals into different dimensions in time and space. I saw things in that country, gentlemen, that I'd never dreamed existed. There were tests, I tell you. I had to show my courage. I had to show my faith in Longcoat Bob and faith in things beyond my understanding. And I believe he was testing me. The more worth I showed, the closer he took me to his secret place." "And where was this secret place?" shouted Albert Strudwick. "Well, I'm sure you'd like to know," Tom said, "but Longcoat Bob's secrets will remain safe with me. Though make no mistake, dear friends, I am, at heart, a scholar, and a good scholar always takes notes." Tom Berry laughed and tapped his temple, and he did not speak then of how the closest thing he'd had to a pencil on the long walk was a pocket knife, and the closest thing he'd had to notepaper was the back of a gold miner's pan. But then he did speak of how Longcoat Bob's walk ended at a miracle, a place of pure impossibility. "It was a vault," Tom Berry said, "a vault of gold in the heart of the deep country. A vault built by the earth, a safe room beyond my wildest imagination, housing more raw gold than I could have carried home on the backs of 10 horses. "Step inside," Longcoat Bob said at the entrance, and Tom Berry stepped cautiously into the vault, and his dark brown eyes were lit up by a blaze of raw gold. Too many fat and raw gold nuggets to count. Gold nuggets the size of apples. Fines the size of oranges. Nuggets shaped like tree stumps as long as Tom's hand. Triangular nuggets. One nugget as big as an eggplant and so heavy that Tom needed 2 hands to hold it. "These are all yours?" Tom asked Longcoat Bob. Longcoat Bob shook his head. "Not mine," he said. He told Tom the gold belonged to the land. He said his people had been finding gold nuggets like the ones in that vault for centuries. But in all his years, he said, he was yet to come across a single gold nugget that brought any real happiness to the person who held it. Longcoat Bob said his family had found one large nugget long ago, centuries back, that resembled a human hand, and it became so coveted by members of his family that it caused fights between brother and sister, sister and mother, father and son. During one dispute, an old woman struck her nephew over the head with the gold hand. The nephew was struck dumb, and his mental capacity was like a waterhole that could never be more than half full after that. And the old woman was so ashamed by her actions that she begged Longcoat Bob's grandfather, the oldest living member of the family, to hide the gold away in a place where no one else could find it. And any other gold nuggets that were found from that moment on, Longcoat Bob's grandfather reasoned, were best hidden away with it too. "And you wouldn't believe what he said then," Tom Berry whispered to his enraptured audience. "He said he and his family saw no value whatsoever in all that gold. He said real treasure was a freshwater spring. He said the real jewels of the earth were gooseberries that grow on trees. He said a good dig, in his world, is when you stick your fist down a bubble in the mud and find a long-necked turtle to grab hold of. He said true wealth isn't having your pockets filled with coin, but your belly filled with white turtle flesh, cooked in its juices, shelled down on a bed of coals. He said the only use for gold was to glitter, and he said the glitter of gold was like the glittering smiles of us white men he'd seen in town, dressed in expensive clothes. He said that gold can't be trusted. He said we all got the gold disease and it rots our hearts. It poisons us. He said it changes who we are, how we behave." "Too right it does," said a liquored prospector, also from Halls Creek, raising his beer glass. And the other gold diggers raised their glasses in agreement. "He said the long-necked turtle didn't do that," Tom Berry said. "He said the turtle was a gift from the earth that kept on giving. He said he rubbed turtle fat on the chests of sick infants to make them strong again. He said the oil and meat from a single turtle could keep a dying elder alive to see an extra month of sunrises. And then he asked me if I thought a month of sunrises was worth more or less than the box of gold that rested in the hole below us. I said it depended on how you spent the gold and how you spent the months of sunrises. And Longcoat Bob smiled at that, and he pointed again at Tom Berry's chest and said, "Good heart, Tom Berry. You speak of good things that can come from gold." Then he gestured towards the gold vault. "You may take what you can carry in your hands, Tom Berry," he said. And in the public bar of the Hotel Darwin, young Aubrey Hook felt as envious as he did sceptical as he watched Tom Berry finish his tall tale of gold lust and gold rewards. "But then Longcoat Bob placed a hand on my arm," Tom Berry said, "and he told me something I will never forget for all my years because it sent a shiver down my weary spine. He said, 'Carry all you own, Tom Berry, but own all you carry.'" And the men across the public bar sipped their drinks in silence and confusion. On the red dirt track far south of Darwin, Aubrey Hook brings the Model A to a stop once more. By the side of the road, he can see two sets of shoe prints. One set bigger than the other. Further on, he can see the snaking track left by something that was dragged carelessly behind the smaller set of footprints. A large stick, perhaps, or a tool of some kind, he considers. A shovel. He kneels down by the shoe prints. He traces his forefinger along the shovel's line. "The gravedigger girl," he tells himself. The miserable legacy of Tom Berry's long walk into the wilderness. He remembers the looks on the faces of every man in that bar that day when Tom Berry told his fabulous story of Longcoat Bob and the mystical vault of gold. Disbelief, disregard, and just the slightest glow of gold envy. "So how much did you take?" asked Albert Strudwick, eyes alight. "I'm not gonna tell you lot," he said, "but rest assured, it's enough to buy you all another round." And he raised his whiskey and triumphantly downed another shot. "Go on, Berry," Strudwick urged, with a treacherous gleam in his eye. "Tell us how much you took." The greatest supply in the prospector's kit is reliable information, and Albert Strudwick wanted more of it. "We all know you want to tell us, Berry," Strudwick urged. "Go on, tell us how rich the most hapless prospector in Australia has become." Tom had promised himself he would not reveal the weight of what he'd carried from that natural vault that day, but he felt the pride of his glittering achievement welling up inside him, and he was going to burst if he held it inside any longer. The molten lava eruption of his good fortune. There was something that always trumped wisdom in any conversation among gold prospectors, and that was luck. The brightest, shrewdest prospectors, and Albert Strudwick was one of them, knew well that all the planning and information and hard graft in the world were nothing against the all-conquering force of a stroke of good luck. "We're about the same build, Albert," Tom Berry said. Both men were short and thin. "How much can you lift in pounds?" "I once carried 2 70-pound bags of flour in my arms," he said. "Reckon I could carry more on me shoulders." Tom nodded, sipped a newly arrived whiskey shot. "Reckon you could carry a couple pounds more, too, if you knew you was carrying pay dirt." The men in the bar were silent then. Some scratched their heads, some slapped their knees in awe, some shook their heads in disbelief. Aubrey Hook was only young, but his father, the late Arthur Hook, had taught him how to find a hole in any surface, and he knew the surface of that grand and miraculous story of Tom Berry's was like the surface of any gold country, full of holes. On the dirt track, Aubrey Hook follows the two sets of footprints, and he eventually comes to a short bridge crossing Candlelight Creek. He and Horace walked up Candlelight Creek when they were boys. Horace was so scared by the darkness that they were forced to turn back after half an hour of walking inside its twisting tunnel foliage. Darkness and light, Aubrey tells himself. There are some who can walk further into the darkness, and there are some who always run back to the light. A world of absolutes. Rich and poor. Cursed and blessed. Good and bad. Truth and lies. "But I am a man of my word," Tom Berry announced in the public bar on that revelatory afternoon. "I told Longcoat Bob I would do good with that gold, and I fully intend to do just that." At the same time as the newly wealthy Tom Berry was building his wife Bonnie and his children Violet and Peter a new and grand house on the Darwin waterfront that overlooked the Timor Sea, he set about drafting plans for a new school, one street back from the waterfront at Mindil Beach. Aubrey and Horace Hook attended the very town hall meeting at which Tom Berry stood on stage in a new black suit and vest and tie and proclaimed proudly to the gathered residents of Darwin that Mindil Beach Primary School would be a place of learning for children of all colours and creeds, all races and religions. From the grandsons of our Afghani cameleers to the descendants of our Aboriginal elders, who are the children of what they call the dreaming, he read from a page of inspired pencil notes. The Mindil Beach Primary School will open its doors to all who are willing to learn, and what learning they will enjoy, from the poems of Edgar Allan Poe to the theories of Pythagoras, and yes, to the traditional campfire histories of this very rich and promising shared territory, passed down by its original inhabitants over the course of millennia. But then, the doors of the town hall swung open, loudly, and some 400 seated attendees turned their heads to the voice of an Aboriginal woman, standing at the entrance of the town hall, calling, "Thief!" It was little Des, and she had come from the deep country to tell the residents of Darwin that Tom Berry's tale of good fortune and long walk redemption was a charade. An elaborate work of fiction masking the fact that he had stolen from little Des's family. "We took care of you," little Des shouted boldly across the town hall as the heads of suited guests reeled in shock and dismay. "And you stole that gold right out from under us." Tom Berry snapped back at little Des from the stage. "Longcoat Bob told me it didn't belong to your family," he shouted. "He told me it belonged to no one. I had every right to take it." Then, a tall figure in a long black coat emerged behind little Des. Some of the town hall guests questioned their eyesight because they struggled to comprehend the vision before them. An ageing Aboriginal man, thin and lanky, but taller than any man in the room, walking silently down the central aisle of the hall, dressed, improbably, in an old black and gold French admiral's frock coat. The Aboriginal man raised his right hand, and exactly what he carried in his hand would be debated for all the years that followed in the pubs and general stores and hair salons of Darwin. Some said it was a stick shaped like a knitting needle, with brown emu hairs tied to the end of it. Some said it was just the man's extended forefinger, but the finger was so long it looked like a sorcerer's wand. Some said it was the bone of a sinful human covered in ochre and resin and maybe even the sinner's blood. The man pointed at the newly rich prospector on stage. "Tom Berry," the old Aboriginal man said loudly. "A heart of stone." And that was all Longcoat Bob had to say. At the side of the bridge crossing Candlelight Creek, Aubrey Hook kneels down and stares up at the black tunnel of foliage that encloses the thin, freshwater creek he walked up as a boy. "The longer I stand, the shorter I grow," he tells himself. He remembers the gravedigger girl writing those words in the scrub. She would write them everywhere. On the back of the Hollowwood water tank, on the side of the thunderbox. She carved those words on trees. She wrote those words with letters made of broken twigs. The ramblings of a grandfather who ran into madness to escape the shame of his lies, to escape the curse of his past. Resting beside Aubrey Hook's left boot on the side of the bridge is a find that he might have once linked to luck back when he was foolish enough to believe in it. An empty round fruit can, its tin lid peeled back so coarsely that he wonders if its owner cut herself when she opened it, leaving drops of blood on her fingers and clothes, stains she would struggle to wash away. The Devil's Heartbeat. The silver road glitters brighter than gold in the daytime. For almost 2 hours, Molly's been walking along the winding track that shimmers with silver light, and still she stops to look at what presents to her eyes as flakes of clear-cut crystal glass beneath her dig boots. Each flake bouncing light and turning that light up close to flashes of pink and purple and aqua. Millions of clear flakes piled upon each other over time, which, seen as a whole, form a gleaming road of silver that Molly feels like she could mould together to form the shining armour of a Camelot knight. Or she could turn all the flakes into building bricks, and she could make a glass castle that she and Greta could escape to after all this searching and questing is over. She sweeps her hands over the silver road flakes and she cups them in her palm, and they feel like fish scales, but their colour is more magnificent, like they are the scales of silver mermaids from deep down in the kinds of seas sailed by Odysseus. "It's ground, Micah," Molly says, "rock crumbs left behind by time." Flakes as thin as the film stock they load into the projectors at the Star, but clear enough and twinkling enough to form the fake night sky that hangs above the picture house marquee. In some places, the clear mica sheets have joined together in layers to create silver, book-like structures that Molly can grip between her fingers and whose pages Molly can count with one eye closed for clarity. "Isn't it beautiful?" Molly says. "Sam told me about the Silver Road. He called it the Glass River. He reckoned a Dreamtime serpent snaked through this whole deep forest here, and that serpent was made of stars, and it was slithering through here for so long it kept shedding its skin. The serpent meant to leave the star skin behind because it knew the Silver Road would help people find their way through the forest at night." The Silver Road winds through a valley of cycads, lining a narrow creek where Molly and Greta stop to rest and eat. They share a can of tinned corn from Molly's duffel bag, and Greta asks the gravedigger girl for an update on their food stocks. 6 cans left in the bag, half a tube of condensed milk, 2 cans of baked beans, 1 of oxtail soup, 1 of ham, 1 of corned beef, and a can of peaches, which Molly keeps resisting the urge to open. "What else have you got in that bag?" Greta asks. "Looks like more than 6 tins of food in there." Molly's fingers run over the blood-red rock she took from her mother's chest. Then she pulls out a book. "The complete works of William Shakespeare," she says. "Well, if we have to lie down and die somewhere out here," Greta says, "at least we'll have the bard to send us off to sleep." Greta rests by the creek, Yukio's pistol in her hands. She thinks of the curious soldier who fell from the sky. She pictures him dead by a bedrock, a full day's walk behind them. In her mind, he's long lost and given up, slumped over in a successful act of ritual self-sacrifice, the ornamental sword he seemed to cherish so much, having disemboweled his flat stomach. "You ever fired one of those?" Molly asks. "A couple of wood ones on stage," Greta replies. "Maybe you should get some practice," Molly says. "I don't need any practice," Greta says. She stares down the length of the gun barrel with one eye closed. "Not much to it. Point and shoot and find a lawyer." Molly pours the last mouthfuls of corn down her wide, open throat and rushes to a large black rock, leaning over the creek like a warthog bending down for a drink. "You don't necessarily have to shoot someone," she says. "You just have to be able to show them you could shoot them if you wanted to. That's how Gary Cooper does it. He'll shoot a can 3 times and make it bounce in the air so all them bad guys soil their pants and drop their guns." She rests the empty corn can on top of the rock. "See if you can hit that," she says. Greta rolls her eyes, reluctantly plants her feet in a shooter's stance and aims the handgun at the corn can. She fires a shot and the bullet chops the head off a young rock fig growing out of a rock wall across the creek, some 10 feet above the level of the corn can. Molly laughs. "Point and shoot and phone an eye doctor." Greta feigns anger. "I'll point it at you if you're not careful." "Have another try," Molly says. Greta inhales deeply and aims again, her left eye closed tight and her right eye zeroed in on the can, with its aluminium top peeled back like an open hatch on a submarine. Her tongue licks her bottom lip and she stops breathing as she pulls the trigger. And no bullets explode from the barrel. She looks at the gun in confusion and she pulls the trigger once more. Nothing but the click of the trigger. She pulls it again. Nothing. And again. Nothing. "There are no more bullets," Greta says. "What?" Molly replies. "Who flies into battle with a gun with only 1 bullet?" Greta asks. Molly holds the gun now. She feels the weight of it. "He only needed 1. For himself," Molly whispers. Greta shakes her head. "Just put it in the bag, will ya?" They walk on. 5 miles along the Silver Road. 6 miles. 7. In the afternoon, Molly rests against a bronze quartzite boulder, being colonised by red shells of wild ruby dockweed. She sips from her water bag, reading a Shakespeare. "Which one are you up to?" Greta asks. "The Tragedy of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark," Molly says. Greta lights a smoke. She has 6 left. "You can just call it Hamlet," Greta says. "Yeah, I know," Molly says, "but I like to use the full title." "Where are you up to in The Tragedy of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark by William Shakespeare, Bard of Avon?" Greta asks. Molly places the open book in her lap. "I just passed the bit where the gravediggers are wondering if Ophelia should be allowed a Christian burial if she took her own life," Molly says. Greta nods, drags on her smoke. "Do you think Ophelia killed herself?" Molly asks. Greta exhales a long cloud of smoke. "Course she did," Greta says. "He doesn't write it like she definitely did," Molly says. "He says a branch might have broke and she fell in that pond." "She didn't struggle too much in the drink, though, did she?" Greta replies, stretching out beside the creek edge, resting her head on her propped arm. Old Bill's being all cagey, because it's hard for blokes to admit a woman might choose death over putting up with more of their bullshit. Molly nods, thinks for a moment. "Do you think Ophelia deserved a Christian burial if she took her own life?" Greta shrugs. "Poor girl wasn't thinking straight," she says. "That's what men can do to you, Molly. Drive a girl bonkers. Make her want to go sleep forever in the nearest brook." Greta looks into the clear creek water. Then she turns to Molly, realises the girl has invested more in this question than humour could return for her. "God would take Ophelia in. Don't you worry," Greta says, nodding. "I reckon he'd know she deserved a proper burial, and the only thing she didn't deserve was some of those fellas in her life." Molly smiles weakly. "You think there's more good fellas in the world than bad fellas?" Molly asks. There's plenty of good fellas in this world," Greta says. "Like who?" "Romeo Montague?" Greta smiles. Molly smiles too. "I like him," she says. Then she looks up to the blue sky.
I reckon my mum didn't deserve some of the fellas in her life.
She looks over at Greta now. Yeah, I reckon you'd be right there, Moll, Greta says.
One of Ophelia's gravediggers was saying this thing about whether or not she went into that water or if that water came to her, Molly says. I wonder about that with my mum. Did she go to that grave in Hollow Wood, or did life bring the grave to her?
Life's always bringing the grave to us, kid.
Yeah, but why bring it so early to some and so late to others?
I'm afraid Hamlet's mum was right about all that, Moll, Greta says.
I forgot what she said about it.
She said all that lives must die, Greta says. And she said we all know that shit's common.
That shit's common?
Molly ponders. Common, Greta clarifies. That shit's all too common. Greta drags on her smoke, rests her head back on a rock. But I guess it's always comin', too. The Silver Road bends through a forested gully, and then a brief canyon lined with hanging five-fingered ferns that look to Molly like 1,000 little green hands reaching out of the rock face. She tests the echo of her voice, and it bounces through the canyon.
Marlene Sky!
She hollers between two hands. Birds fly out of the canyon, startled by the noise. Rainbow bee-eaters, hooded parrots, bustards, and 2 northern rosellas with black, white, and blue-violet wings. Molly and Greta can feel and smell the humidity of the north. Everything sweats. Everything is damp. The walls of the canyon are smooth and stained black by water runoff. Greta's saddle shoes slip on wet, slimy rocks, and she fights to fill her lungs in the thick air, and she doesn't feel like smoking so much in these strange places. The Silver Road meanders on through great green palms shaped like wood screws stuck in the earth, and passes a great sandstone outcrop that Molly sees as a giant wombat. Except the wombat wears a jagged battle helmet on its head with shards of sandstone jutting abruptly from the top in case the wombat's unlikely battle foes, echidnas dressed in chainmail, possums wearing plate mail, choose to leap atop its head. Molly pauses to stare at a majestic green emperor dragonfly, caught and tangling itself further in the sticky web of a St. Andrew's cross spider. The dragonfly looks to Molly like something flown by the Wright brothers, with a torso made of what seems to be some rare kind of soft velvet pea beaded on a black string, and a scorpion's tail and vast wings that are clear but somehow shimmer with purple light as the dragonfly flaps in fear of being so close to the web's master builder.
The dragonfly's still alive, she calls to Greta,
who has stopped to scratch the back of her calves with a stick.
The spider's coming to get him now, Molly says. I'm going to pull the dragonfly out.
You can't do that, Greta says. That spider probably hasn't eaten a meal in days, and it's gone to all that trouble to build a web to catch some lunch.
Does it have to eat something so pretty?
Molly asks. Don't think spiders give a damn about pretty, Molly, Greta says.
They just haven't seen a Carol Lombard film yet, Molly says. I'm going to pull the dragonfly out.
How could you be so cruel? Greta responds. I reckon a dragonfly would be better than rump steak to the average spider, and you're going to come along and rip that poor spider's lunch away just as it's tucking its serviette down its shirt front. What sort of monster are you, Molly Hook? At a small freshwater spring, Molly and Greta stop to share a can of corned beef and refill the water bag. Molly scoops her half of the corned beef onto a plate fashioned from a strip of smooth paperbark and sits on a flat rock by the spring. Greta complains of a throbbing pain in her lower back. She slips off her emerald dress, turns her back to Molly and asks her to inspect her lower spine. Molly places her paperbark plate of corned beef on the flat rock, walks over to Greta and immediately spots two fat leeches sucking their way along the top lining of the actress's underpants. There's another leech crawling up the back of her left thigh. "Leeches," Molly says. "What?" Greta gasps. "How many?" "3," Molly says. Greta executes a strange shuffle that makes her look like she's barn dancing. "How big are they?" she asks, panicked.
"Well, judging by their size, I'd say they've had main course and they're progressing to dessert."
"Get them off!" Greta howls.
"Nah,"
Molly says. "What are you talking about, nah?" Greta exclaims. "Get the bloody bloodsuckers off me, Molly!"
"You're best to just let 'em have a feed and they'll drop off all by themselves,"
Molly says. "That's ridiculous."
"It's not. They keep all this filth inside their stomachs, and if I was to go ripping them off halfway through a meal, there's a chance some of that filth could get stuck inside your open suck wounds."
"Suck wounds?" Greta repeats. "Oh, dear," Molly whispers. "What?" "One just crawled onto your backside." "Get that thing off me!"
"Just relax and let 'em finish up," Molly says. "Besides, just think of all the trouble they went to crawling up those long pins of yours. They probably haven't eaten for days, and now you want to just rip them away from their grub? What sort of monster are you, Greta Mays?"
"Molly, get them off me, damn it!" Greta screams.
All right,
says Molly, who has already found the paring knife in her duffel bag.
"Don't chuck her, Willie."
She scrapes the paring knife gently and carefully beneath the narrow head of each fat-bodied leech, flicking them in turn from Greta's pale skin.
"You'd better move away," Molly says. "I think those leeches have got a taste for German rump."
Greta rushes across the flat rock, slipping her dress back over her shoulders, zipping it up at the back. But then she freezes, because she hears something moving in the wall of scrub fringing the freshwater spring. "You hear that?" Greta asks.
"Hear what?"
Molly replies, finding the place in the scrub where Greta's eyes have been drawn. Stillness now, a bird whistle, a trickle of spring water, and the actress and the gravedigger girl staring at a wall of palms and cycads and banksias. More a feeling than anything else. No evidence for it, just a chill down Greta's spine.
"You think he's following us?"
Molly asks. "Who?"
"Yukio."
"You guys on a first-name basis?" Molly shrugs.
"I'm just saying his name."
"I think we'd be dead by now if he was following us," Greta says. Molly turns back to the rock beside the spring just in time to see something she has to look at twice to be sure it's not an illusion. Not deep country magic. The wide, black-brown wings of a wedge-tailed eagle plummeting downwards. Greta spots the bird now too. "Ah!" she screams. Molly is frozen by the silent predator and keeps watching as it swoops down to her flat rock and, without ever touching ground, claws 2 large clumps of her corned beef in its large talons and then arcs back up and out of the clearing as gracefully as it entered it. It's an act so bold it could only be the work of a queen. Close up, Molly could see how beautiful she was, how regal, how strong. If she'd wanted to, Molly tells herself, she could have lifted the whole duffel bag in those deadly talons, food cans and rock heart included, taken it high into the sky and back to her family to inspect her plunder from Horace Hook's pantry. Molly can push only one word out of her voice box.
"Wait!"
she calls to the eagle. "Jesus Christ!" Greta says. "What the bloody hell was that?"
"She was beautiful," Molly says. "Have you ever seen anything so pretty?"
"Scared the shit out of me," Greta says. "Cheeky bitch stole your lunch."
"She needs it more than me,"
Molly says, and shrugs. She thinks to herself for a moment.
Imagine being that brave, Greta. Only mums are that brave. Mums with kids to feed.
Then, a thumping sound from beyond the spring. It sounds like it's coming from deep beneath the forest floor. A thunderous drumming in hell. Thump, thump, thump.
What is that?
Greta asks. Thump, thump, thump. Something heavy pounding into earth. Molly has no answer for Greta. She reaches for her friend, the shovel she calls Bert, because Molly and Bert are on a first-name basis. The gravedigger girl follows the thumping sound along the silver road that runs through an avenue of blue cycad trees with leaves the colour of the moon. Thump, thump, thump. Louder now. A thin walking trail branches off the road of shimmering mica, and Molly and Greta branch off with it, Molly leading the way, gripping Bert's handle ever tighter as the thumping grows ever louder. Thump, thump, thump. Something being crushed. Something breaking into pieces. Rock. Then a noise so loud it hurts Molly's ears and makes her shoulders jump. An explosion inside a cave. Gelignite, Greta says. Molly quickens her step, follows that sound along the thin trail, which breaks through a screen of ferns and hanging vines into a clearing where Molly stops before what she can now see is a small mine built deep in the heart of the deep country. Thump, thump, thump. Molly and Greta kneel behind the cover of a thick fern bush to assess the scene. There is a rudimentary crushing plant housed beneath a triangular shed of rusting corrugated iron sheets, leaning on poles made of the blue cypress pines Molly and Greta have been passing since the Clyde River. A tin mine, most likely, Molly tells herself, built against a sloping wall of dark grey rock, crawling with weeds and vines. Two men in blue singlets and wide-brimmed hats are overseeing the crushing of hulking chunks of white quartz. The rocks are being placed under a motorised crusher made out of 3 heavy, rusting steel block stamps that are being raised and dropped by a series of rusting camshafts. Thump. The steel stamps pound so hard upon a quartz boulder that the rock breaks into 4 pieces. The miners then feed the pieces into a rattling jaw crusher that mashes the stone into a gravel that will be transferred to a sluice box, which Molly figures must be somewhere close to this mine beside a natural waterway. Cut along the upper side of the rock slope is a small rail line about 50 yards in length that extends from the crushing plant to the mine entrance. A hole blasted into the side of the rock face, just like the ones Molly remembers her father showing her on top-end bush camping trips, not so long ago when Horace Hook still walked in light moods. Horace told her most of those blown-out mine shafts were only useful now to the ghost bats who call them home during the daylight hours. But there's fellas still finding their riches all across this country, Horace said, and they guard those treasure holes the way a magpie guards its nest. Every bastard is a threat. The mine entrance is not much wider than the door to a 2-man tent, and a man emerges from it now, hunching down and pushing a cart of mined ore. He wears a singlet and pants and a brown stockman's hat. His brown beard is full and billowing down to his chest. His skin, Greta whispers. Molly looks closer. There are small lumps across the man's arms and shoulders, ulcers and scarring. His right cheekbone is abnormally enlarged, and the skin on his forehead is swollen and so dry it started to crack like the clay in Hollowwood Cemetery during a drought. The man lifts heavy rocks from the minecart into a hopper connected to the crushing plant
and Molly can see now that 3 of the fingers on his right hand have been severed at the middle knuckle. On his left hand, he's missing his thumb and forefinger.
"Let's keep going," Greta says, standing and turning to go back the way they have come, but she stops because she is confronted by a large man resting a pickaxe on his shoulder, filling the width of the trail back to the Silver Road. Greta inhales sharply, reels back at the sight of him. His face, too, is dry and so swollen that it looks distorted, like it's been moulded out of shape. There are patches of scarring and discoloration across his neck and arms, welts and small growths. But Greta is drawn mostly to his eyes. He has no eyebrows nor any eyelashes, and he only has one eye he can see out of, his left one. Where his right eyeball once was, there is an empty socket containing a thin pool of blood. His nose is distorted and big. Molly can't remember when she last saw a man built like this. He's a giant to her. Big, broad shoulders, big biceps, big legs, big fingers and thumbs, big brown hair on his head in natural and careless curls. "I'm sorry," he says softly, a thick Irish accent. His face is so stiff his speech feels like old air being forced through a crack in a mountain. "Not so easy on the eye, am I?" He chuckles to himself. "We've been up here so long, we almost forgot what we must look like to pretty girls like you." Greta gives him a half-hearted smile. She studies the man's face. "You two lost or something?" he asks. Molly jumps on the question.
"We're going to find Longcoat.
My fella and this one's dad are camped back along the plateau," the actress interjects with a natural ease. "We were out looking at the birds and butterflies when we heard that rock crusher thumping away, and we thought we'd come and have a look at what was scaring all the birds off." The man with the pickaxe nods. He looks at Molly, and she nods too. Then the large man smiles. "Well, let me fix you a warm brew before you go." The crusher hammers into another chunk of quartz. Thump, thump, thump. Twigs and dry leaves break beneath boots behind them. Greta looks over her left shoulder to see the 2 miners from the crushing plant now standing behind her. "Thanks for the offer, but we'd best be pushing on," Greta says, moving forward. But the large man steps sideways to block her. The beating of Greta Maze's heart. Thump, thump, thump. "Please," the large man says, dropping the pickaxe to his waist. "I'm afraid I must insist." 2 thick logs for seats, and a stump for a table. A black billy simmers on an iron heat rack stretched across a fire, set inside a circle of broken rocks. The large man with one eye holds an enamel cup filled with tea in his left hand. He sips, and he appreciates the warmth of the brew. Molly holds her tea in 2 hands, her elbows resting on her knees. She's staring at the swelling and crusty ulcers across the one-eyed man's face. She sees his fingers more clearly now, sees how he still holds the teacup comfortably by its handle, despite having lost the little finger of his left hand. Greta sips her tea, and the large man watches her do so, and so do the 4 miners standing behind and to the sides of the improvised tea setting. Each one has his own unique range of visible swellings and lesions across his face and limbs. One of the miners is a red-haired boy who can't be much older than Molly. His left cheek and left upper lip are so swollen that it looks like they might swallow up his mouth, which has retreated into his chin. "Thank you," the one-eyed man says. "For what?" Greta asks. "For drinking from my cup." "The cup was clean," Greta says. "They always are," the one-eyed man says. "But few are willing to drink from 'em." He sips again. My name is George Kane, he says.
Greta Mays.
Greta turns to Molly, the girl's cue to say her name. But Molly isn't following the conversation. She is too transfixed by the red pool in the well of George Kane's right eye. He winks his left eye, and the action snaps Molly out of her staring. She drops her head to focus on her tea. "And what's your name, young lady?" Kane asks.
Molly, she says. Molly Hook.
"Go ahead and ask me," Kane says.
Ask you what?
Molly replies. "That question on the tip of your tongue."
What question?
Molly asks. "I know," Kane says, smiling. "How do I keep my hair so clean all the way out here in the scrub?" He runs his hands through his thick, brown mop. "Vinegar," he laughs. "I wash my hair in vinegar." Molly smiles.
I'm sorry I was staring, she says.
Kane shakes his head. "There's a lot to look at, unfortunately." "You boys come over from Channel Island?" Greta asks. "You know Channel Island?" She nods. "I act a bit," Greta says. "Me and some friends. We were asked by the church to go over and perform for the kids." One of the toughest performances of Greta Mays' fledgling career. Crossing Darwin Harbour and disembarking at the Channel Island Leprosarium. Good money, bad memories. Singing popular show tunes for a group of children, mostly Aboriginal, living with leprosy and forcibly removed from their families in Darwin and sent to Channel Island. Minimal access to doctors and medicine, scarce food and running water, even for the visiting theatre troupe. Armies of mosquitoes and flies, and an island of dead bodies in shallow graves. "I didn't know quite what that place was," Kane says. "I thought it was a prison at first, but then I realised it was a cemetery. They sent us there to rot. We should have burned that place to the ground." He stands and addresses the men around him. "But now, we're here safe in the scrub." He smiles. "While Australia burns." And the men around him smile and nod their heads, and Greta Mays wonders exactly what kind of place they have walked into. "What do you mean, Australia burns?" Greta asks. "Haven't you heard?"
Heard what?
Molly asks. "We're done for," Kane says. "Who's done for?" Greta asks. "Australia," he says. "It's done. It's no more. All those selfish, proud men in red coats that turned into black suits. The ones who came here from across the sea. They thought they could turn this place into a New England. They'd chased everyone who didn't look like them out of the cities, and now the Japs have burned all them city princes and princesses to dust." He drops his voice to a whisper. "They hit Brisbane with twice the force they hit Darwin," he says. "Boom, boom, boom." Stalking around the campsite now, charged by the electricity of his own visions. Then they moved on to Sydney, and all those fat men in all those tall buildings didn't see the fire coming. They could only stare at it through their office windows, and they watched the heat blister their skin. They watched the fire distort their faces. This is the end of CD 7. The book continues on CD 8. CD 8. Seated on the log, Greta slips a hand around Molly's arm, squeezes it, discreetly shakes her head. The girl knows her now. She knows her looks. She trusts them, and this one says this can't be true. He's not a good one, Molly. "And in the reflections of their office windows," Kane says, "the last thing they ever saw was the monsters they had become." Then Greta sees George Kane whispering to a younger, thinner man with lesions across his bald head. Kane has his back turned to Greta and Molly, and Greta can't figure out what he's saying to the bald man only that he's saying something he doesn't want her to hear. Greta whispers to Molly. "Give me the bag," she says. Molly unslings the duffel bag and slides it to Greta with her foot. Cain turns back around and resumes what Greta notes is rapidly becoming a sermon. "And now the meek shall inherit the earth," he proclaims. And the men around him nod because they are as easily impressed as they are led. Cain finds his seat again on the log in front of Greta and Molly. "All of us exiles and outcasts," he says, "will start all over again, and we'll be happy, and a century from now the people of this land will celebrate the day the bombs of the Imperial Japanese Navy blew greed and avarice into the wind." He takes another sip of tea, then throws what's left into the fire. He turns to speak to Greta, who now has her hands inside the duffel bag. No welcome and no warmth in his voice anymore. Only suspicion. "What's in the bag?" he asks. "Just a few tins of food," Greta says. "Water, stuff from home." Cain looks deep into her two eyes with his one eye. A long, painful silence. "There's no one waiting for you back by that plateau, is there?" Cain asks. Greta is silent. Then she smiles and says, "Thank you for your hospitality." She taps Molly's shoulder, gets up. "We'll leave you fellas to it." Molly stands, gripping Bert the shovel. "Thanks for the tea," she says. George Cain nods at Molly, remaining seated. He nonchalantly waves a finger at the men behind him. They immediately close in around the actress and the gravedigger girl. Greta turns to face the men and swiftly pulls the Japanese handgun from the duffel bag. She points it confidently, sweeping her arm across the men. "Get back!" she snaps. "Back!" And George Cain laughs. "The gun has no bullets," he says. He gets up from the log, struggling to haul his large limbs into motion. Then he points to the red-haired boy. "Shane over there was quite taken by you girls back by the creek." Shane gives two short snorts that constitute his laughter. Another large man in a hunting jacket turns to Shane and makes fun of his snorting by snorting loudly 3 times, and this makes all the men laugh, and they're laughing now like deranged clowns, and their bodies close in on the girls, and Greta steps back from them. "Get back," she says, feebly. But the bodies come closer, and the deranged laughter makes Molly Hook think of her Uncle Aubrey, and she finds the eyes of the bald man with lesions across his face and his scalp, and his mouth is wide, and his laughter sounds like a car horn, and his hands are reaching for her, and all she has in this strange world is her best friend after the sky, Bert the shovel. And she swings him hard at the bald man's nose, and blood rushes from his nostrils as he falls to his knees. Greta steps back further from the men, who rush at her now, and she falls into the arms of George Cain, who bear hugs her with all his strength, the crusty welts and scabs across his arms rubbing against her shoulders. The actress stomps her feet on his boots, kicks her heels against his shins. Molly turns her head in time to find the red-haired boy charging wildly at her. But the gravedigger girl is wilder, and she swings her gravedigger shovel, and the root-cutting teeth of Bert's blade meet the red-haired boy's left ear, and the top half of that ear pops away from his head and soars momentarily through the air to land a foot from the crackling campfire. Stunned, the red-haired boy falls to the ground, clutching his severed ear, his fingers running through dirt and gravel in search of the rest of it. "Run, Molly, run!" Greta shouts, twisting her body in the grip of heavy-set Cain. Molly sprints through a gap in the group left by the stunned and bleeding boy. And the day sky talks to her now. "Run, Molly, run," it says, and she listens. She listens so well. She bashes through ferns and figs and palms, and her shoulders and legs are scratched by the thorns of weeds. "Don't look back, Molly, don't look back," the day sky says. "Greta!" Molly screams as she turns into the detouring path that took her away from the Silver Road and down to the bad ones. "Don't look back, Molly," the day sky says. She runs and she runs and she runs. Greta! She calls to the sky. Don't look back, Molly, the day sky says. And Molly sprints on through the scrub, and she bursts through a fringe of palms back to the side of the creek, where she leaned happily against a rock, reading the works of William Shakespeare. Greta, Molly says. Don't look back, the day sky says. Run, Molly, run! But she stops. She turns around, sucking air into her lungs. And she knows now why the sky asked her not to look back. The bald man with the bloodied nose is bursting through a natural fern wall and charging at her. She turns to run again, but he's too fast, too filled with rage. His right hand grips her shoulder, and the momentum of his running is enough to drag Molly along the creek bedrock, the skin on her kneecaps and shins tearing away against the sandstone surface. Then he drags her to the creek, and he dumps her head, face first, into the water, and her world exists only underwater now. Clear water. Bubbles from her mouth. Pebbles on the sandy creek floor. The bald man holds her head down, and the shock of these actions unfolding within a second causes Molly to suck a belly full of water. And that water has nowhere else to go but to circle around her good heart that has been turning to stone. George Kane dragging Greta along the ground by her right arm. The man in the hunting jacket dragging her by her left arm. Greta kicks uselessly at the earth. Let me go! She screams. Fucking animals! Animals! Let me go! There is spit coming from Kane's mouth. Sweat across his face. He turns to a man in a black stockman's cap with a red work shirt and braces. Kenny, Kane says, go help Hoss with the girl. Kenny runs off towards a thin path Molly ran down moments ago. Kane points at Shane, the red-haired boy, now with a rag pushed hard against his left ear, still stunned by the actions of the gravedigger girl. Crank the plant up, Kane barks. She chopped my ear off, the boy says, sounding as hurt by this event as he is confused. Just get the fucking crusher started, Kane hollers. And Greta hears the spitting of oil inside a rusting generator. And then she hears the movement of cranks and pulley systems coming to life again. And she's being dragged along on her back. And she can see flashes of cloud and blue sky. And she leans her head back hard to her left to see where she's being taken. Greta screams. A primal howl. Deep terror in it. But rage in it too. Fight. She thrashes along the ground, and an arm slips free, and she punches at her captors. The man in the hunting jacket kicks her hard in the stomach, and the blow wins her, and she sucks deep for breaths that don't fill her lungs. Let me go, she says, but the words barely come out. George Kane stands over her now as she lies flat on the ground, his face, his disfigured and crusted face, close to hers. His right hand is big enough to grip both of her cheeks and squish her lips together. Don't you see, he sneers. Don't you see, pretty girl? We cannot let you go, pretty one. You will run back to what's left of your home, and you will tell the survivors of that airborne apocalypse that you have found a paradise deep in the scrub, and they will come for us. And they will bring all their fear and prejudice with them, and they will turn our new sanctuary into the same hell they just watched burn to dust. Then the thumping. Greta turns her head and sees the 3 rusted steel block stamps piled on top of each other, thumping into flattened earth. Thump, thump, thump. Kane grips Greta by the neck and pulls her. Closer, closer, closer to the thumping stamps of the crushing plant, which feels alive to Greta. A living thing of metal and oil, monstrous and hungry, with rotating arms and jaws and a need to crush her skull like a block of mineral-rich quartzite. Kane shouts at the red-haired boy. "Rope!" Molly drowning. Molly with nothing left. The bald man's right arm forcing her head into the still creek water. She is Ophelia now, in the grip of the brook. She will not have her Christian burial. Maybe she doesn't deserve one anyway. She thinks of her father in the fork of the tree in Hollowwood Cemetery. She should have buried him properly. She counted at least 6 holes the Jap had dug deep enough with their sky bombs. She could have pulled Horace from that tree and placed him in one of those holes and sent him back to the earth that made him. But she had to walk away. She had to find Longcoat Bob before it was too late. She had to find the sorcerer before her heart turned to stone like her father's did so close to the end. A stone heart like his brother's, like her uncle's. Uncle Aubrey. The bald man's face, she remembers. It was disfigured. But beneath the bald man's swellings and lesions was a face that reminded her of her uncle's face. Could that be possible? A dark magic, perhaps. The work of Longcoat Bob. She left her uncle to squirm and rot in the Darwin sun back there in Hollowwood Cemetery. But maybe Longcoat Bob resurrected Aubrey Hook's soul, or the earth did, and placed it in the body of the deranged bald man whose arm seems so filled with strength and hate as he holds her down, down, down inside her water death. Sam said the earth would rebel. Sam said the earth would not want her here. But who said Molly Hook was not allowed to rebel too? Dig, Molly, dig. Dig for your courage. Dig for your rage. And the gravedigger girl thrashes her head in the water and pushes her head back against the hand that holds her down. Her legs kick and thrash against the rocks on the surface, and then, as if the earth is responding to her will, relenting to it, the hand holding her hair and her head falls away. The pressure eases, and the clear water surrounding her turns red. Her head is still under water when she sees the body of the bald man fall in and down into his own water death, the eyes open on his disfigured face, looking back at Molly. Such surprise on that face, such confusion. Then Molly's underwater eyes find the source of his puzzlement, a hole in his stomach, leaking blood into the water in the languid way the smoke from Bogart's cigarette can fill an office. Blood folding in the water like cirrus clouds in a blue sky. Molly lifts her head out of the water and sucks air into her lungs and turns to find the Japanese pilot standing above her, his sword fixed in his right hand, its short blade red with the blood of the man who now floats face down in the creek.
"Yukio,"
Molly whispers. She breathes again, hard and fast, her backside flat on the rocky creek bank, soaking wet.
"Yukio Miki,"
she says, pointing at the pilot between further sharp inhalations.
"The good one."
Gathering her breath, but needing to acknowledge this.
"I knew it, Yukio. I knew it."
The wonder of all this. She points at him again.
"The good one who fell from the sky."
Thump! The steel block stamps meet the ground, and the brief shockwaves of that meeting reverberate beneath Greta's flat back. Thump! "Who told you about us?" Kane barks. "Nobody!" Greta says. Her arms are outstretched, and her hands are bound by rope that tears at the skin on her wrists. Circles of blood around her ankles, where her feet have been roped together too tight. "Who else knows you're here?" Kane blasts. "Nobody does," Greta says. "Please, please, nobody knows we're here. We came looking for someone. Thump, thump, thump. Steel blocks smashing against the earth. Who are you looking for? The girl, Greta says. There are tears in her eyes now. The girl believes she's had some sort of curse put on her. She wants to find the black fella who can take the curse away before her heart turns to stone. She shakes her head. It sounds foolish saying it out loud. She breathes hard. That's the truth, she says. You let us walk out of here, and we won't tell a soul about this place. I swear that to you. Greta pants, panicked, primal. Kane studies the actress's eyes. Throw me that bag, Kane says to the red-haired boy, who immediately slings Molly's duffel bag to his boss. Kane kneels, dumps the bag's contents at his feet. He inspects a couple of food tins, flips through the Shakespeare, scans the gold pan briefly and tosses it aside. Then he holds the blood-red rock up to Greta's eyes. What's she carrying a rock for? Kane asks. Greta shakes her head, confused. I don't know, she says. I've never seen that rock before. Kane drops the rock and finds Molly's paring knife. The girl is not cursed, he says. How could she be cursed when she has just looked upon the new world? The steel stamps thump into the ground. Kane leans over Greta's face, his body so large. The smell of toil. Yellow pus inside the open lesions on his neck. He runs the point of the knife along the bruising on her eye. Someone tried to disfigure you, he says. Who did this to you? Greta is silent. Answer me, Kane says. Just someone I knew back in Darwin, she says quietly. Someone you loved? Kane asks softly. Greta nods. Kane turns to the redhead boy. Go to the house, Shane. The boy stomps like a petulant child. But you said I'd have my time. Your time will be with the girl, Kane says. But all in good time, Shane. Shane runs off along a path that fringes the mine entrance and disappears into the scrub. Greta reels in horror, bringing her knees to her chest. Get away from me, you fucking animal, she screams. She pushes herself across the ground with the heels of her tied feet. Shh, Kane says. Please understand that if you move again, I will be forced to keep your head extremely still beneath those steel blocks. Please tell me you understand. Thump, thump, thump. It's a new world, Greta, Kane says. There are no rules in this new world of ours. There are no laws. Greta's shaking. She nods. She weeps. Kane's thumb wipes away a tear. He tried to make you ugly, he whispers. He runs his thumb now across her face. He failed. He smiles. Who would do this to something so beautiful? Greta shivers. I will never do this to you, Kane says. We will treasure you. We will always know what you are. Greta shivers, moves her head away from Kane's fingers. What am I? You are the beginning, Kane says, and his eyes move down her body to the hemline of her emerald dress and the skin of her thighs beneath it. You are Eve, he says. The man in the red shirt with the black stockman's cap runs along the path to the creek to help his friend, Hoss, bring back the strange girl who could handle herself with a shovel. His name is Kenneth Spencer, and he's 36 years old. He has always believed in the things George Kane told him, but he believes them more than ever now. George told his men the old world was done for. He told them about the kraut with the funny moustache who was putting an end to England. He told them about the Italians and the Japanese who would help destroy the old world. He promised his men there would be women for the new world when the old world ended, and Kenny Spencer knew every one of those words to be true the second he saw the gravedigger girl and the actress wander into their bustling tin mine utopia. Kenny Spencer bounds through a thick wall of palms and ferns and finds himself at the flat rock by the mine's well-frequented creek, where he sees the girl who's steeled his beliefs. She's sitting by the creek edge on her backside. He runs to her, but then he stops. The girl hugs her knees to her chest, looking into the water at something that has made her frightened. It's a man, floating face down. A tall, bald man. It's his friend, Hoss. The girl turns to Kenny Spencer.
"Please don't hurt me,"
she says, and Kenny Spencer realises there is more to this girl than George led him to believe. And if there's more to the girl, then there might be less to George. And that makes him uneasy about the new world. And this is the last thought he has, staring into the eyes of the girl by the creek, before a cold blade slices across his Adam's apple. Molly watches the man in the red work shirt and braces collapse onto the rock floor, blood streaming from his neck like a burst water bag, leaving only the figure of Yukio Miki, of the day sky, standing with his pilot boots 2 feet apart, braced for any further attack from beyond the forest walls. Molly nods her approval. Then she stands and hurriedly dusts the dirt and rock debris from her hands. "Greta!" she says, rushing past the man with the bloody sword. She leads the way back to the tin mine, through the avenue of blue cycads the colour of the moon. The loud thumping of the rock-crushing stamps rumbles beneath their feet, and Molly treads lightly as she approaches the mine entrance. She turns back to Yukio and puts a finger to her mouth. Shh. The metal arms and jaws and legs of the crushing plant. Cranks turning, shafts spinning. The steel block stamps still thumping into the earth. The loudness of it all, the machinery of it. The man in the hunting jacket standing at a distance from the drop of the crusher stamps. He watches his boss, George Kane, who has his back turned to him, leaning over the actress, cutting the last threads of rope that bind her ankles. The colour and shape of the actress's legs have excited the man in the hunting jacket, and he thinks about running his hands over those legs and spreading those legs apart, and he thinks about pounding the actress's insides with the force of the crushing stamps that pound so loudly behind her. And this thought is the last thought he has before a cold, sharp sword blade runs silently across his throat. The man in the hunting jacket falls to the ground, but Kane does not hear his friend's death unfolding over the sound of the turning and thumping machinery. Yukio Miki now silently approaches George Kane's turned back. The heavy-set miner cuts the last link in Greta's ankle ropes and gently shifts her legs apart. Yukio raises his sword, 2 hands on the hilt held high, the blade pointing downwards like a fighter plane set to fly into the target of the stranger's large back. He says a word in Japanese, "Yamero," but he's not heard in the sound of the machinery. Thump, thump, thump. He says it louder, "Yamero!" And Kane turns, and his face turns white when he sees the vision of a Japanese soldier with the sun behind his back, body glowing, light shimmering off the blade of a raised sword. Yukio's eyes fix on the stranger's blood-red eye, and then fix on the paring knife he holds in his right hand, and the pilot hacks instantly at Kane's right wrist, but the hallowed Mickey blade severs limbs in a single swing, only in the family stories that Mickey men have passed down through generations. Yukio hacks again at the wrist, and Kane is left stunned by the sight of his right hand hanging loosely by a thin bridge of flesh. Eventually, he gathers his thoughts and, in turn, finds his rage, and he charges at the Japanese sword carrier, who changes the thrust of his elbow and instantly braces himself to drive the blade deep into the one-eyed man's round belly. But the rage-filled miner keeps moving forward along the blade until the hilt guard is pressing against his skin and the blade tip has pushed through to his spine. Kane's big left hand reaches for and grips Yukio's throat, and the bloody nub of his severed right wrist pushes deep into the underside flesh of the pilot's jaw. Kane drives with his legs, and Yukio, two hands still grasping the sword hilt, is lifted up and carried for several yards before Kane drives the pilot's back hard into the ground as he falls forward on top of him. Then the giant with the sword through his gut presses all of his weight on Yukio and invests every last ounce of his strength into choking the Japanese pilot to death. 5 seconds. 8 seconds. Yukio gasping for air. Up this close to Kane, Yukio Miki wonders for a moment in this brief hell if he has found himself before an Oni, one of the supernatural demons his grandfather Saburo told him about as a boy. Those giant, disfigured monsters who passed across the demon gate from the world of darkness. They had a third eye mashed into their foreheads, and they had extra fingers and toes, and strength enough to walk with blades pierced through their stomachs. 10 seconds. 12 seconds. Yukio out of breath, feeling like he's swallowing his own Adam's apple, the hand in the nub of a monster. "I'm coming, Nara," he tells her. "I don't know how it came to an end like this, dear Nara, but I am coming." Then a large red rock, shaped like a heart, smashes into Kane's right temple. Then it smashes again, and Greta Mays howls with fury as the blood-red rock that Molly took from inside the bone pillow of her mother's chest meets the bones of George Kane's face. Still, the monster squeezes the pilot's throat, and still the actress smashes the rock against the side of Kane's face. "Animals!" she screams, and she is rage and blood and fear, and she is past and she is present, and when she screams that word again, "Animals!" she is including herself in the gallery of monsters in her mind. The falling steel stamps of the crushing plant. Thump, thump, thump. The rock hitting the side of the giant's head, his blood splattering onto the face of the Japanese pilot until, at last, George Kane slumps still and dead on top of Yukio Miki. Greta pushes hard at Kane's side, and Molly is there now to help her, and the actress and the gravedigger girl heave the miner off Yukio and onto his back with the hilt of the blade still lodged in his belly. Greta stands over the Japanese swordsman. Her hands and body are covered in blood. Yukio sucks air back into his lungs as he watches the actress go and wipe her hands on the pants of the dead miner. And then he watches her walk back to him and stand over him once more, breathing, 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 and studying his face, staring into his eyes, examining the splatters of blood across his skin. And then she extends her right arm. She offers the pilot her hand, her shaking right hand, and he raises his right hand up to hers, and the two hands meet in the middle of the silent space between them. Greta Mays pulls Yukio Miki to his feet. Delirium tremens. The questing shadow man. He does not stop to vomit. He spews 3 mouthfuls of blood and bile as he walks, and the vile stomach slurry showers the speargrass of the floodplain far beyond Candlelight Creek. The sun is high and hot, but his body is cold and shaking. He drinks from floodplain waterholes, but what his body needs more than water is gin, vodka, whiskey, turpentine. his hands shaking, his knees shaking. But he walks on because the hate inside him is the only thing he has to keep him warm and moving. Only animal now. Only hate. Head aching, clammy skin. The bite wound in his shoulder blade still weeping and full of vivid yellow pus. Dizzy. He passes purple and pink flowers, and he turns back to these knee-high flowers on occasion because he could swear the flowers have eyes for petals, and these eyes are following him. But every time he turns back to catch them staring, they look away. Weak muscles moving so slow, but a heart beating so fast. He walks through a small city of meridional termite mounds, and he believes for a moment he is walking back into hollow wood. In one straight row of termite mounds, he sees the names of Tom Berry's kin, because all he sees is hate. He sees their names on their gravestones, and he sees their reasons for being buried in the ground. The most profound and rotten season of bad luck to ever befall a single family in all of Darwin history. Some 4 members of Tom Berry's kin, all of whom perished within 3 months of the night the black sorcerer, named Longcoat Bob, pointed his finger at Tom Berry from the doorway of the Darwin Town Hall. Aubrey looks deep into the face of a large termite mound. He sees a name in bold letters written across a gravestone. Theodore Berry, 1866 to 1916. Tom Berry received the news in a telegram only 5 days after Longcoat Bob made his announcement in the town hall. His brother, Theo, the eldest of the 3 Berry brothers, had been working alone, as he often did during the slower seasons, on his wheat farm in Claremont, central Queensland. When production was halted by a blockage in his grain silo, he tied a safety rope to his waist, as he had done numerous times, and lowered himself into the silo to unclog it. When the safety rope snapped, Theo found himself immersed to his shoulders at the centre of a cone-shaped depression of wheat grains. When he tried to dig himself out, the mounded grains began to slowly slide down the cone-shaped slopes and engulf him. He called to his wife, Marg, who could not hear his desperate pleas for help because she was weeding the front garden of the couple's farm cottage, some 60 yards from the grain silo. Remaining perfectly still, Theo Berry managed to slow the gradual slide of the suffocating grains, which was pressing down hard on his chest, and eventually his throat, long enough for Marg to realise her husband wasn't coming to the house for his usual afternoon tea. Theo heard Marg's calls beyond the silo walls, just as his mouth and nostrils were filling with seed. "Theo!" Marg called. "Theo!" Theo used his last gasp of air to holler, "I love you, Marg, and I always will." Then his head was drowned by the grains. Aubrey chuckles. Then his eyes find another epitaph in the termite mound city. Esme Berry, 1843 to 1916. Tom Berry's aunt died 3 weeks after Theo from a gastrointestinal infection. Clara Berry, 1845 to 1916. Tom Berry's beloved mother, Clara. A month after her sister-in-law died, Clara's right leg fell clean through a rotting wooden board on the thin rear deck of her small home in Batchelor, south of Darwin. Her leg was gouged sickeningly through the rear calf when it landed on the large, rusted tooth of an old manual crop cultivator, which was being stored in the space beneath the deck. The tooth went so deep that the town surgeon said the leg would have to be amputated above the knee. But the surgery was poorly carried out. The leg became infected. Gangrene set in, and Clara Berry died a painful death some 2 months after the death of her sister-in-law. Aubrey's eyes moved to another mound. Charles Berry, 1909 to 1916. It was at Clara Berry's wake that Esme Berry's 7-year-old grandson, Charles, was challenged by 2 older boys to eat a peculiar slug they had found crawling in the backyard tool shed of the man who was hosting the wake, Darwin Councilman Henry Pegg. That afternoon, in Pegg's living room, with his fingers sticky from the scone he was eating with jam and cream, Charles Berry fell to the floor and began frothing at the mouth and shaking with convulsions. He died on the right shoulder of Henry Pegg, who was then running towards the Darwin Emergency Hospital. And Aubrey Hook smiles. He laughs at the wild misfortune of it all. Then he howls, his deranged and deep guffaws echoing across the still floodplain. It was after the death of young Charles Berry that the Darwin Examiner made the first public press reference to a rumour that had been swirling across town. Longcoat Bob had put a curse on Tom Berry for the sin of his greed, and the curse was proving to be real. The newspaper ran a quote from an anonymous source who claimed to have been in the Darwin Town Hall the night Longcoat Bob placed his so-called curse on Tom Berry. "The sorcerer had a bone in his hand," the anonymous witness said. "He pointed it at Mr. Berry, and he said in a loud and commanding voice, 'I curse you and your kin, Tom Berry. Your hearts will turn to stone.' That's what he said. And look at all that bad fortune that's come over that family. That black fella was talking black magic, and the rest of us was lucky he didn't decide to talk to us." Tom Berry tossed the newspaper into his living room fire when he read it. "There's a difference between a curse and piss-poor luck," he screamed, so loud it made his wife, Bonnie, jump in her armchair beside his. "Did any one of those people die of a stone heart?" Tom Berry barked, uncapping a bottle of whiskey and reaching for a glass. "Has my heart turned to stone? Has your heart turned to stone, Bonnie? Have mercy." Bonnie Berry sat in silence, looking into the warm fire and wondering if her husband's statements were entirely true. She'd seen something change inside her husband since his return from his strange and fruitful odyssey through the deep country. And despite his newfound wealth, a cloud seemed to follow him wherever he went. He was irritable and, although now more generous, less kind. And how was Bonnie to explain the heaviness of her own heart, were it not itself undergoing some slow transformation? How was she to explain how low she had felt in recent months? She had tried to express to friends the feeling of unwillingness she had carried for so long, a dread of living that made her belly sick. Unwilling to rise in the morning, unwilling to cook, unwilling to clean, unwilling to love anyone and anything. She read so many poetry books that sang of the workings of the human heart, its mystic machinery, of the fountain inside of us all that gives and receives love in the endless and glorious thud of a chest beat. She placed her palm on her chest by the fire, and she could feel the beat of her heart, but she could not feel the love she had once kept inside it for her husband. A heart that can no longer love, she told herself, might as well be made of stone. "Tom," Bonnie said by the fire. "Yes, my love." "I think you should put the gold back where you found it." Aubrey Hook stares into the floodplain sun, and his fever vision splits the sun into two, like a double yolk egg frying on a skillet. He dumps his head into a waterhole, slaps his face hard. Then he marches on across the floodplain, his hatred giving him pace. His mouth is dry and desperate for spirits. He wonders about explorers who came through here on horseback and on foot. He wonders if they ever tossed their whiskey bottles from their horses, buried them in dirt to save for return journeys. Buried spirit treasure. He curses the blacks who walked these isolated lands for millennia and never once took the time to construct a saloon among the forests and plains, a glowing 2-story pub with piano music and song echoing through its windows, high up on the range he can see in the distance. He walks along a woodland avenue of fern-leaved grevilleas and milky plum trees with yellow fruits that he rips from the branches in desperate grabs and shovels into his mouth like they were pub bar peanuts. "The damned," he tells himself, his mouth full of fruit, juice streams spilling down his chin. "The damned!" He laughs. He knows whose footsteps he's following. The footsteps of damned Tom Berry, the accursed gold miner who made his intentions clear for all to read when he placed an announcement in the Darwin Examiner. Public notice. I, Tom Berry, hereby proclaim my solemn vow to return all the gold I recently acquired to the God-forsaken hole in which I found it. It is with great displeasure that I must publicly acknowledge the growing hysteria and muddy rumour that has swirled in recent months around the Berry family. I do not believe in blackfellow magic. I do, however, believe in plain bad luck. And ever since I brought this gold back to Darwin, it's the only kind of luck my family has seen. I swear, under God, Longcoat Bob told me that gold did not belong to anyone. But I am man enough to admit at no time did he say that gold should belong to me. I have been found guilty of my own pride and my own greed. I do not believe in curses, but I believe a man should admit when he's wrong, and where possible, he should endeavour to right his wrongs. I will travel back into the deep country as soon as I am able, and I will put that gold back where I found it. And should Longcoat Bob's finger indeed wield a dark and inexplicable power, and should he still be pointing that finger at my family, I expect him to promptly stick that finger someplace else. Aubrey Hook howls again, and his laughter fills the space between two walls of a jagged sandstone canyon. The double sun falls in the sky. He stops by a swamp to feast at a gooseberry shrub that has dropped an entire season's worth of green tomato-like wild fruits, some 26 of which Aubrey shovels down his throat, the way he used to shovel grave dirt into buckets. "Berries!" he howls to the sky. "Tom's berries!" He drops his strides immediately after feasting on the gooseberries, and he squats and releases a diarrhea torrent onto a patch of grey sand. After cleaning up as best he can, he fills his right pants pocket with more gooseberries, and he fills his left pants pocket with a handful of eucalyptus leaves that he rips from a young stringy bark. Further along his frenzied journey, he finds a rusting billy can in a natural rock dish in a sandstone outcrop, and he lights a night fire from gathered sticks and paper bark that he ignites with one of his lit cigarette papers. He boils the eucalyptus leaves in the billy can and drinks from the can, then splashes the boiling water over the festering bite wound in his shoulder. He lies by the fire with his arms gripping his pounding chest, his body shaking. He stares into the fire and he repeats the words of Walt Whitman. "I laugh at what you call dissolution." And inside the fever and inside the flames, he sees a memory of himself. A young man, tall and handsome. That young man kept his promise. He survived the rockfall that killed his hate-filled father, Arthur Hook, and he held true to his private pact. He had only love in his heart that Sunday afternoon when he rode his horse to Violet Berry's home on the Darwin waterfront. He roped his ride out of view of the house's windows to lengthen the odds that Tom Berry might see a son of Arthur Hook approaching his yard. He walked to the front door unseen and was about to knock when he heard Violet's laughter echoing from the backyard. Aubrey trod lightly down the side of the house and, half hidden by the curve of a rusting water tank, he spied Violet beneath a sprawling backyard milkwood tree. And he saw the awful reason for her laughter. the hands of the young man who lay beside her, squeezing her ribs. And then he saw the awful owner of Violet Berry's heart, that soft young man beside her, that vibrant and joyful and weak young man beside her, that second son of Arthur Hook, his own beloved brother, Horace. Aubrey Hook went riding alone along the waterfront that Sunday afternoon. He took his horse to the highest point he could find along the dripstone cliffs, overlooking the beach, stretching beyond the rapid creek inlet. He gave the horse a 50-yard run-up, and he heeled it hard in its belly, and it galloped towards a blind cliff-top horizon. They were but 10 yards from the edge, when something inside Aubrey's heart caused him to pull hard on the reins and circle away from the void. This certain something inside him would prove, in the decades to come, to be a light in all of his endless dark hours. Nothing else would prove so sustaining. Not love, not work, not liquor. The only thing that ever saved Aubrey Hook was hate. "I laugh at what you call dissolution," he mumbles at the fire. "I laugh at what you call dissolution." Repeat, repeat, repeat. And if he says these words long enough, then she might return to him. "I laugh at what you call dissolution," he says, "and I know the amplitude of time." Repeat, repeat, repeat. "I laugh at what you call dissolution, and I know the amplitude of time." Repeat, repeat, repeat. "Failing to fetch me at first, keep encouraged, missing me one place, search another. I stop somewhere waiting for you." And he sees the face of Molly Hook's mother. "I laugh at what you call dissolution," he mumbles, "and I know the amplitude of time. Failing to fetch me at first, keep encouraged, missing me one place, search another. I stop somewhere waiting for you." And he sees the face of Violet. Repeat, repeat, repeat. The third sky gift. Ophelia. She is drawn to the rapids. She is 16 years old and walking barefoot along a plateau buried in the blue sky. Her infant son is 4 months old and curled comfortably inside a sling carrier made of bush string, paper bark, and cane strips. From terraces high above, a river plummets into a deep, craggy sandstone gorge, and the force of the great and relentless water rush against the rocks sprays a fine mist onto her face, even as she stands some 25 yards back from the lip of the gorge. She climbs up the side of the Clearwater Rapids and stops at a deep pool where the current moves more slowly. She lays her baby down inside the sling on a flat rock, and the boy's eyes find points of colour and movement and light and settle on his mother's eyes, staring back at his. But then, the mother's eyes start weeping, and then the mother's eyes turn to the pool, and she walks away from her baby. Reaching the water's edge, she plants a hand on a large, water-worn boulder for balance, finds her footing among the loose black rocks on the surface of the deep emerald pool. She dives under the water and propels herself only with her legs, mermaid-like, emerges with a deep breath, then breaststrokes in a circle before turning to float on her back with her arms and legs outstretched and her eyes filled with all the blue in all of the sky. Just one fluffy, fat cloud, and she tells herself it looks like a big, white witchetty grub without its yellow head. She can hear herself breathe, and she can hear the rush of the rapids downstream, and she lets the water push her. The witchetty grub starts to crawl across the blue roof, but that's just an illusion. The cloud isn't moving. She is. The slow, gentle push of the current. Push, push, push. And the girl drifts slowly along the surface of the water, towards the gorge. And to the sky, she makes a wish. She wishes to be water. Because water has no feeling. Water feels no pain. Water is never afraid. Water feels no sorrow. And she thinks about the life she could have had if she'd known how to move through this complex earth the way water always knows how to move through it. The sky-buried treasure. The Stone Country. 3 wanderers of the Silver Road that turns and twists, just like a python turns and twists as it slides along the base of a nearby ironwood tree. Its movement and its size drawing applause from a foreign spectator named Yukio Miki. Single file. Greta Mays walks in front, and Molly Hook pads along in the middle, turning her head back regularly to find the strange pilot stopped before another natural northern Australian point of wonder. He bends down to a frill-necked lizard resting on a burnt log, and the lizard fans its red frills in defiance of the smiling man's inspection. He passes a eucalypt tree with a hole in its trunk the diameter of his own head. Molly watches Yukio insert his right arm into the hole, pull his arm out and study his right fist, now crawling with orange and white termites. Yukio watches Molly reach into a nest of stingless black bees, wedged between 2 branches of a stringy bark tree, and pull out a handful of deep red sugar bag honey, which looks to Yukio like melting wax. She drops a dollop of the honey in Yukio's hand, and she eats a dollop herself. Greta finds another nest nearby and grabs a handful of the dark, strong, flavoured gloop too. Yukio tentatively licks the honey in his palm. Liking the taste, he slips it all into his mouth, and his eyes light up like his smile. "Migoto," he says. "Very, very Migoto," Molly says, licking her hands. At a slow-moving freshwater stream that cuts across the Silver Road, Greta relieves herself behind a thick wall of shrubs with red, pendulous flowers whose small pink fruits sprout tentacle-like fibres that make the fruits look like they've been snap-frozen in a state of self-combustion. Yukio follows Molly to the stream. He stands above her as she kneels down. She points 2 fingers to her own eyes, and then she points to the stream. "You," she says, "watch for crocs." Yukio is blank. "You be on the lookout," Molly says, pointing to her eyes again and then pointing to the water. "Crocodiles," she says, forming her hands into a snapping crocodilian mouth. "They'll drag you down underwater, wedge you under a rock, and let you tenderize for a month." Yukio nods, casting a keen and immediate eye across the stream. Molly places Bert the shovel on the muddy ground beside her boots and reaches into the duffel bag. She pulls out the blood-red rock that she found inside her dead mother's chest. It's stained now, covered in splatters of blood from the smashed head of the one-eyed tin miner monster. Molly places the rock in the clear water stream and rubs the monster's blood away. "Out, damn spot! Out, I say!" she says to herself. Yukio studies the girl's actions, curious. Molly feels him looking over her shoulder. "It's my mum's heart," she says. "It's what happens at the end of the turning, Yukio.
It's what Longcoat Bob done.
Molly looks up at Yukio, the weight of the story across her face.
He said our hearts would turn to stone, and my mum's heart slowly did. And now I can feel my heart going that way too. It's getting heavier, Yukio. I feel it inside me. I've stopped caring about people.
She looks at the sword hanging from his belt.
I watched you cut the throats of those men back there, and I felt nothing for it, she says. Do you follow me, Yukio?
She asks, but she doesn't care if he doesn't. It feels good to say it out loud, and maybe even better, saying it to someone who can't understand.
I wasn't scared, she says. I wasn't sorry. If anything, I was glad you did it to him.
She studies Yukio's face, blank but for his eyes, which say he's listening hard to the gravedigger girl.
Can you understand anything I'm saying to you?
Yukio is silent. He smiles uncertainly.
You?
He says enigmatically, repeating the last word he heard.
You can't understand a word, can you?
Molly asks.
You,
he says again. Molly nods, smiling. She turns back to the water, stares at the red rock in her hand.
That's how it starts, she says. You go numb. You stop caring about people. You start to hate things. You only care about yourself and all the things swimming around in your own head.
She grips the rock, squeezes it hard like she wants to break it in two, but it has no give in it.
Then you wake up one day and your heart has finally turned all the way to rock and you feel nothing whatsoever. So it makes no difference if you're here or if you're not. This rock can't feel nothing, Yukio. No matter how much I could feel for it, it can't feel nothing for me. Why am I even carrying it, Yukio? It can't feel nothing. It can't give nothing back. I should just let it go. I should just drop it right here and let it sink to the bottom of the creek, and it can sit there feeling nothing for 1,000,000 years.
Yukio notices a cloud of colour mixing with the water. A thin layer of red-brown clay or dirt pulling away from the rock, like it's losing a layer of skin. It looks to Molly like the blood of the bald man she saw rising like smoke in the creek water.
It's bleeding,
Molly says. She watches it bleed its colour into the water. And she watches the folds and waves of that colour disappear into the slow current. And at first, she doesn't realise that Yukio is kneeling beside her now. Then he's gently lifting her arm up out of the water, and he's reaching for the blood-red rock and holding it in his cupped hands. He dries the rock with the inside of his flight jacket, and he places it gently into the duffel bag. Then he hands the bag by its strap to Molly. You, he says, and Molly hears something instructive in the word, something encouraging, something with care in it. Purple sky with streaks of pink and red, streaks of fire. 3 wanderers moving under and over sandstone ledges, around freestanding rock outcrops. A shifting landscape, stone country turning to brief rainbow-coloured clusters of orchids and banksias and woollybutt trees. Then turning back again to stone country filled with runs of misshapen boulders that the gravedigger girl and the actress and the pilot who fell from the sky must clamber over for 2, 3, 4 miles. Yukio tells himself to stop sneaking glances at the actress, but his eyes have a will of their own, and they keep finding new small wonders in the things the blonde woman does. The way she helps Molly over 2 slippery moss-covered rocks. The way she tucks a clump of that wild hair behind her right ear. The way she pretends not to see the way he looks at her, and then the way she decides to stare straight back at him, looking so deeply that he doesn't speak a word inside his mind, in case she hears it. And then he must look away from her, because he feels she could turn him into a scared boy with a single glance. And then he must look to the sky for his manhood. And then he looks at the purple and pink afternoon sky. He talks to it, because when he talks to the sky, he is talking to Nara. Can you see me, Nara? I was coming to you. I am coming to you, Nara. I promise. Will you wait for me? At a muddy billabong, Greta spots a thick-bodied, light brown snake with a small head shaped like a bulldog's head. The snake burrows itself down into a sloshy bed of mud to hide, but Molly spots the black and scaly tiger prints of its skin before it disappears. "File snake," she says, digging Bert deep into the mud. She heaves a mud load from the ground, and the file snake is pulled up with it, wriggling and fretting on the shovel blade and then leaping off it towards Yukio's military boots. He steps back with a brief yelp and only has a moment to see the snake's head before it's chopped off by the side of Bert's blade. Molly picks up the file snake's still wriggling but headless body and hands it to Yukio. "Hold this for me, will you?" she asks. Yukio builds a teepee-shaped campfire out of dry branches and paper bark, and when the fire has turned to hot coals, Molly drops the file snake on top of them, whole and unskinned. While she waits for the snake to cook, she reads Romeo and Juliet aloud to Yukio. She acts out Romeo's passages in her best Tyrone Power voice, Fair Verona by way of Universal Pictures, Los Angeles, California.
"If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin in this my lips, two blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss."
Molly's eyes light up with the matinee idol thrill of Romeo Montague's boldness. When she acts out the words of Juliet, she channels a lovesick and exasperated Vivian Leigh in Gone with the Wind.
"Come, gentle knight," she gasps. "Come, loving black-browed knight, give me my Romeo, and when I shall die, take him and cut him out in little stars, and he will make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with night."
And the night comes, and Molly cuts up the file snake by flamelight, and Yukio's wakizashi, slicing its fat and juicy but stringy flesh into segments the size of sausages, which Yukio and Greta chew and suck and swallow down with deep gratitude. In the flickering flamelight, Molly takes a long moment to admire Yukio's short sword. She runs a light finger across the cutting edge, and that finger finds the engraving of a butterfly above the sword's hilt.
"Why a butterfly?"
Molly asks, holding the image up to Yukio. Yukio nods.
"Butterfly?"
Molly repeats. Yukio nods. "Butterfly," Yukio says.
"Yes, it's a butterfly," Molly says. "But why do you have a butterfly engraved on your sword?"
Yukio is silent for a long moment. He smiles. "Butterfly," he repeats without confidence. Molly tears a mouthful of snake flesh from its crispy skin and turns to Greta. "You can't understand the thing we're saying," she says, her words muffled by the snake meat.
"I can't understand a thing you're saying when you talk with half a snake in your gob,"
Greta replies. She looks at Yukio, and Yukio looks back at her. Greta smiles back at him. "I reckon he understands enough," she says.
"I'm gonna test him,"
Molly says.
"How about you quit rambling and just eat your mud snake before it goes cold?"
But Molly doesn't take to that suggestion. She lifts her head to the stars in the sky, but the words that come from her mouth are not related to the stars.
"I think he's handsome,"
she says. "Molly!" Greta shrieks, short and flustered. Molly continues to talk to the stars, and Yukio's eyes follow Molly's to the heavens. He has a smile like Clark Gable, she says, staring deep into the night sky. Stop it, Molly, Greta says gently.
I think he's smitten with you,
Molly says, head up still.
He's been staring at you all day, and I saw you staring at him once too.
She chuckles to herself. Molly, that's enough, Greta says, louder than she had intended. Yukio whips his head around to Greta, and she is forced to ease his curiosity with a smile and a shake of her head. She does love those stars, Greta says, pointing upwards. Yukio nods, smiles. 3 wanderers flat on their backs around a campfire, staring up at the stars. Molly's fingers turn into a pair of scissors.
Cut him out in little stars,
she says to herself, and when she cuts out the face of Romeo from the star-filled night sky, it's the face of Sam Greenway she sees. Sam Greenway, hunter of buffalo, star-crossed thief of hearts. Greta's eyes are closed, but she does not sleep. She still hears the thump of the rock stamp from the tin mine worked by the monsters. The fear of it lingers, and that fear reminds her of hopelessness and pressure, and those things remind her of the hospital room and the baby in her arms. So she opens her eyes, to fill her mind instead with a cinema screen of pulsing stars. Still night. No wind this deep in the country. The sounds of cicadas and the sound of wood popping and crackling in the fire. The skin layers of dry ironwood log the size of a full Christmas ham being eaten away by flame. Nothing more but the night. And then Yukio Miki speaks. Yukio had wife, he says. Nara. He thinks on his words. He thinks on his English. 100 or so words that he might be able to drag up from his tired mind to answer the girl's question. Died, he says. Sick. Very sick. Greta turns her head to see the pilot talking to the sky on the other side of the fire. She looks at Molly, and her puzzled face says the same thing Greta's does. He can speak English. Yukio held arms, he says. He's crying now. He holds his own chest. Yukio, speak. Nara. No. Afraid. No, afraid. Yukio, promise. Promise. Nara, change. Nara, fly away. Nara, still beautiful. Molly and Greta prop themselves up on their elbows, waiting for the pilot to say something else. He turns his back to them and lies on his side, closes his eyes. Only one more line to say before he sleeps, and it comes out slowly and clearly. Nara is butterfly. This is the end of CD 8. The book continues on CD 9. CD 9. In the dawn light, they pass 3 large spherical boulders left balancing and exposed by erosion on a ridgeline that lights up in the rising sun.
Look! That's us! Molly says. Greta, that's you up front, the bigger boulder. That's me in the middle, the little one. And that's Yukio up the back. See it, Greta? See?
I see it, Molly. Greta says, rubbing sleep from her eyes as she hauls her body over several jagged sandstone rocks. Molly stops abruptly, and Yukio and Greta stop with her. "What is it?" Greta asks, concerned. Molly swings her head around. She breathes the morning air in deep through her nose. She looks up at the sky, shimmering with pinks and reds, slowly transforming to blues. She breathes in the trees, the rocks, the insects beneath the rocks, the lizards beneath the dirt, the worms beneath the lizards, the dirt beneath her fingernails, the blood beneath her skin. "What if we're the treasure?" she asks. She looks back up at the sky. "I'd try to hide us too. That sky is the lid of a treasure chest. That sky is a blanket or a cloak." Molly turns to Yukio, who struggles to understand the girl. "We are treasure buried by the sky," Molly says. A brown and emerald green bird in the sky makes a sound and spreads its wings wide to show two white coin-shaped dots on their undersides. "Dollar bird," Molly says, and she talks back to it. "Cluck, cluck, cluck." Yukio joins in from behind. He says, laughing. "Ye say, good morning, Molly Hook?" Molly smiles. The bird makes another call. Molly turns back to Yukio. "He just asked us around to his place for breakfast," she says. "He's got fresh coffee, and he's fried a bunch of eggs and some bacon steaks as thick as my head." Molly responds to the bird's kind invitation. "Sorry, mate, can't stop. We've got to find Longcoat Bob. You know where he is, Mr. Dollar Bird?" "Bob," Yukio says. "Longcoat Bob." "Yeah, Longcoat Bob," Molly says. "Didn't realise you spoke such good English, Yukio and Mickey." Yukio raises his forefinger and thumb, leaves a small gap between both. Little, he says. "English come, Sakai. Molly speak English. Good," he says. "You bet your ass I do, Yukio Mickey," Molly says. "I'm poetic and graceful." She spots a large army of green ants building a nest between two thin twig branches of a flimsy tree with floppy green leaves. "Look at this, Yukio," Molly whispers, leaning into the tree where a line of ants with amber bodies and glowing jade-coloured abdomens are carrying a white grub along a designated worker road on a branch. "They make their homes out of leaves. Some of the ants are the tough ones who will work together to hold the leaves up, and some of the ants are the clever ones who will weave the leaves together, and some of them are gluers who use that white stuff they're carrying to stick all the leaves in place." Yukio releases a brief sigh of awe. "See the bridge?" Molly asks. The ants have built a bridge out of their own connected bodies to create a shortcut for the gluers wanting to access a branch below them. "I wish that fella Adolf Hitler could see this," Molly whispers. "Hitler?" Yukio echoes, confused. "Yeah," Molly says. "We could get Hitler and what's his name? Mussolini." "Mussolini," Yukio says. "Yeah, Mussolini," Molly says. "We get Hitler, Mussolini and Winston Churchill all together and they could come and look at this ant bridge for a while, calm themselves down a bit, just watching some green ants working for an hour or two." Yukio turns to the girl for a moment, puzzled by her words. "Sam says he once saw a group of these fellas combining their strength to drag a dead honey-eater bird back to their nest." Molly says, "That's like you and me carrying a brewery home for after-dinner drinks."
These fellas will build this home for themselves and they'll take care of the other insects on the branch as well. They'll protect the little caterpillars and aphids around them who thank them for the protection by shooting honeydew from their asses.
Molly nods her head in reverence.
Yep, gotta bow down to the aphids, Yukio. Even their shit tastes like sugar. These ants drink honeydew like my old man drinks plonk.
Drank, Molly tells herself. Drank. Her old man doesn't drink anymore because she asked for the sky gifts. Plonk? Yukio repeats.
Yeah, plonk,
Molly says.
Grog, slops, piss, plonk.
Yukio then watches Molly grab a green ant by its head and bite its backside clean off.
They're tasty too,
Molly says. She eats another.
Try one,
she says, nodding to the ants.
But just bite the ass, not the head.
Ass, Yukio says, not head. The Japanese fighter pilot eats the ass of a green ant.
Ooh,
he says. Molly nods.
Tastes like mint,
Molly says. Mint, Yukio nods.
Good for a sore throat.
Molly grips her duffel bag strap and takes one last look at the ant nest.
Yep, them ants. They're the ants' pants,
she says. She continues along the path and Yukio walks with her.
Ants' pants,
he says.
Yeah, Molly says. That's Australian for the bee's knees.
Yukio doesn't follow. Greta watches these interactions unfold, shaking her head.
Look, Yukio, says Molly, you're probably going to be spending a bit of time here in Australia, so I guess you should learn how to speak like one of us.
Yukio struggles to understand, but nods his head anyway. Molly strolls on, using Bert the shovel like a walking stick.
If you walk into a pub here, let's say, I don't think it would be good for you to be speaking all that Japanese, Molly says. People talk different in those pubs. They've got their own language and it's not Japanese, but it's not English either.
Not English? Yukio asks.
This crow-eater had a fair dinkum blue with the trouble and strife, Molly says. That's Australian for the man from South Australia had a genuine disagreement with his wife.
Greta, who is walking 5 yards ahead, turns to smile at Molly.
If you want a meat pie, you ask for a dog's eye, Molly says. If you don't know where some place is, then you can say it's in Whoop Whoop.
Whoop Whoop, Yukio repeats.
If you're out of money, you say you haven't got a brass razoo.
Molly adopts her thickest, outback Australian drawl.
Haven't got a brass razoo, so I'm gonna shoot through.
Shoot through, Yukio says.
Yeah, you've got to go, Molly says. You've got to leave. Shoot through.
Shoot through, Yukio repeats.
Yeah, that's it,
Molly says.
But slow it down and stretch it out. Shoot through.
Yukio ponders her words and responds, shoot through.
That's it, Yukio, she says. Now, here's what you say if you need a shit.
The silver road lost its luster long ago. The peppering of shimmering mica flakes slowly giving way to rocks and pebbles and thin stretches of dirt covered in rock wallaby prints and the tail drag marks of black wallaroos. They pass a group of brilliant green and yellow fig birds fussing about in the upper strata of a cluster of tall fig trees. The pilot and the actress walking side by side in silence now. Mica flakes beneath their shoes. Bird whistles. Molly has skipped ahead. Thank you, Greta says. Yukio turns to Greta, confused. Thank you for saving me, she says. You saved me from those men. Yukio nods. They walk on in silence for another minute, a long one. I've never killed anyone before, Greta says. Yukio thinks on this for a moment. Greta Mays. No kill, he says, shaking his head, pointing back over his shoulder to the tin mine, to the recent past. Yukio kill. Man. Greta takes a breath. That's nice of you to say, but I think I might have helped a bit, she says. Another long pause. War, Yukio says, shaking his head. Greta can only assume what that means, and she takes it to mean that Yukio believes one-eyed giants of the woods act differently amid the pressures of war. Guess you might have killed someone before, she asks. Yukio looks at Molly. He nods only once. He watches the girl as her eyes follow the soaring flight path of a gold and green pigeon with a rose-pink crown. I thought it was beautiful, what you said last night, Greta says. Yukio stiffens. What you said? About your wife? She says. Yukio nods. Where were you going? Greta asks. Yukio is confused. In your plane, Greta says. When we saw you come down, where were you going? Yukio looks at Greta. Her face, her green eyes the colour of her dress, her hair when it moves in the light like that. He looks away from her and he's saved from the moment. Saved from feelings he does not understand, by Molly running back to him. Yukio! She hollers. Yukio! Her hands are cupped, holding something inside them. I've got a gift for you, she says. She uncups her hands and a butterfly with flapping wings the colours of a tiger launches itself haphazardly into the sky. Butterfly! Molly rejoices. Butterfly! Yukio smiles. Greta walks on ahead by herself. Molly and Yukio watch the tiger butterfly disappear into the thick vine scrub lining the path. I've been thinking about what you said last night, Molly says. You said your wife didn't just die. She stops and thinks harder on what she's trying to say. Well, she didn't just go into the ground. Yukio turns to the girl, expressionless. Molly continues. You said she turned into a butterfly, she says. What a beautiful thing to turn into. Yukio nods, silently. I lost my mum when I was 7 years old, Molly says. Yukio nods, silently. Molly tells Yukio Miki again about the curse of Longcoat Bob. She tells him about her home at Hollowwood Cemetery, a place where she helped her father and her uncle bury people in dirt. She hoped for so long that there was more to death than dirt. Then you come along and say there's butterflies, she says. They walk along silently for a stretch, passing a rocky vine thicket studded with pale grey trees, with shiny dark green leaves and bright orange berries. Them Japanese bombs blew Hollowwood up, Molly says. Them Japanese bombs blew my dad to bits. I'm sorry, Yukio says. Nah, I know it wasn't you, Yukio, Molly says. I didn't see no place for bombs on your little plane. She kicks a rock the size of a tennis ball with her right boot. It rolls along for 10 feet or so, and she kicks it off the path with another solid boot. But maybe my mum and dad transformed too, she says. Maybe they're butterflies now, or maybe they're the grass, like Walt Whitman says, or maybe they're the sky. Molly looks up to the blue sky. Thin day sky clouds like flour dusting a bread loaf. The day sky and the night sky, Molly says. Day sky, Yukio nods. Night sky. Night skies tell no lies, Molly says. Night skies tell no lies, Yukio repeats, smiling. The three of them stop to drink from a thin, freshwater creek. Molly shows Yukio her grandfather's gold pan. She runs her fingers along the line on the flat underside.
This was the first gift from the sky, Molly says. It's leading us to Longcoat Bob.
She looks to the blue sky again. It's now filled with high puffs of small, round clouds that look to Molly like the scales of a black brim.
Then I asked the sky to drop them bombs on hollow wood, Molly says, but I didn't want those bombs to blow my dad to bits.
She puts the pan back in the duffel bag and they all walk on.
You were the next gift, Yukio, Molly says. You fell from the sky. You came to help us.
She looks further along the dirt track at Greta, who is marching ahead through a mess of strangler figs inside another pocket of vine forest.
Or maybe you came to help Greta, Molly says.
Greta, Yukio repeats. He watches her walking when he says her name.
She's sad, Yukio, Molly says. There's something inside her that makes her low. My friend, Sam, he's a black fella who knows all there is to know about this deep country, and he said the land gives you all you need if you know the right way to ask for it. I reckon the sky is like that too. You saved us back there, Yukio. You fell from the sky because you knew you had to save us. You had to save me, and you had to save Greta. The sky knew she needed you.
The vine forest clears, and the thin track disappears into a giant sandstone rock formation shaped like an igloo, split by a thin crack down its middle, with enough space for a body to walk through sideways. Greta turns to her side and puts her arms out as she squeezes through the narrow space, eyes raised to the line of sky running across the dome. Molly and Bert the shovel follow Greta, and Yukio follows Molly. Yukio's eyes light up when he emerges from the crack to find he's standing inside a kind of natural gallery space enclosed by high walls of sandstone and a wide rock overhang. On the other side of this space are three openings, like exits, one leading to the east, one to the north, and one west. The floor of the space is dotted with smooth, eroded grinding holes. On the wall beside each opening is a vivid and ancient rock painting. The eastern wall features a painting in reds and browns and whites and yellows of three tall, thin figures wearing dresses, which seem to Molly to be women but are also strange-looking and not of this world. They have no eyes or noses or mouths, but seem to be staring at her, and she is unsettled by these stares. On their heads are what appear to be headdresses shaped like quartered lemon pieces. The figures seem important, like they have all the answers to all of Molly's questions.
Where am I going?
She asks them.
Why have I come this far?
Then the whole truth of the gravedigger girl in a single conundrum.
Why did she go?
On the northern wall is a painting of a white kangaroo, standing tall on the tips of its back legs and looking down on something, and on closer inspection, that something is a tall ship at full sail. Yukio runs his fingers over the ship's faint white sails, and the ship seems like a ghost ship to him, sailing across a mystic sea of ancient red rock, sailing away from the giant kangaroo, who looks to Yukio, when compared to the tiny tall ship, like one of the giant sea monsters his grandfather spoke of when Yukio was a boy. Creatures that rose from the seas to drag mariners to their death. His grandfather said some of those monsters were so big that it took Japanese mariners 3 days to sail past one. and young Yukio pictured a monster watching the mariners as they passed by, the creature pondering when it should strike, the men wondering when they might die. His grandfather said some mariners could not stand the weight, the terrible suspense, and threw themselves overboard in preference to being swallowed up and sucked into the slimy innards of the sea monster. Yukio, aged 8, told his grandfather he would wait it out.
"What if the monster let them sail by?"
the boy asked.
"What if things got better for them?"
"Yes," his grandfather said.
"But what if those 3 days sailing past that monster were the most terrifying and hellish 3 days any human could ever be subjected to? Looking into the eyes of those creatures was a hell beyond anything our books could conjure." "I'd just close my eyes," Yukio said. "When I opened my eyes, I'd be alive, and the 3 days would be over. If I didn't open my eyes, I'd be dead, and I wouldn't have to open my eyes at all." His grandfather smiled. "Ah, dear grandson," he said, "you always seem to open my eyes a little wider every day."
Yukio smiles now. He follows Molly to the western wall where Greta is captivated by the image of a creature that looks like a cross between a man and a bug and a fish. Thin human arms and legs spread wide, but the torso is made of what looks like a fish skeleton, with the tail placed where a man might normally find his backside. Molly sees the painted creature man has a head like a cartoon beetle's head, with big circles for eyes, no mouth or nose, and 2 upright antennae. From the side of its head, what looks like 2 bamboo sticks curve down to its feet. 2 rods, thinks Molly.
"The lightning man," she says. "Sam told me about the lightning man."
She traces the rods running from his head.
"Lightning shoots out from his ears, and he bends it down to us, all of us down here on Earth, because he wants to show us that everything we need in life is coming soon."
Molly places a palm against the rock.
"My grandfather was here,"
she says. She pulls the gold pan from her duffel bag. She runs her fingertip along a sentence etched into the pan.
"West, where the yellow fork man leads," Molly says. "My grandfather was poetic. He didn't see the lightning man. He saw a yellow fork man."
And Molly whispers now,
"The lightning is a yellow fork."
"Come again?" Greta asks.
"Emily Dickinson," Molly says. "She wrote about the sky. She must have seen the most incredible lightning in the sky, forked lightning. She saw things in the sky like I see things. She looked up there and wondered where that gift of the lightning came from. She wondered who was up there, dropping things from that house in the clouds."
Molly slings the duffel bag back over her shoulder.
"It's coming,"
Molly says to Greta, eyes alight.
"Let's go. It's coming."
And Molly rushes through the western archway, which opens onto a thin, brown dirt path, bordered by tall trees. "What's coming, Molly?" Greta calls. Molly turns and talks as she marches backwards.
"Everything we need, Greta," she says. "Everything we need."
The 10-second sky. The red-haired boy, Shane, has knotted a lengthy rag around his head to staunch the blood that wants to spill from his severed left ear. And now he swigs from a bottle of moonshine, hoping all that hut-brewed white spirit will give him spirit enough to join his friends in the afterlife. He has dragged the bodies of his dead tin mining colleagues together beside the campfire. He had thought that laying the men down in a uniformed row would give his dead friends the respect they deserve. There was something right about the effort it took to do that under God's watchful eye. Fishing Hoss with the stab wound through his belly from a crimson-coloured corner of the creek. Dragging Kenny Spencer with his sliced throat back through the scrub to the mine site to lie beside McDougal, the man in the hunting jacket, also with a sliced throat. George Kane was the toughest to pull into the uniformed line, not just because of his dead weight, but because the one-eyed Kane was the man who raised the red-haired boy. Shane looked upon George as father and mother, two parents inside one giant man, making up for the mother and father who had left him on the doorstep of the Darwin police station 14 years earlier. Shane lined the bodies in a row, flat on their backs, their faces to the sky, then staggered back down the bush path leading to the stone, wood and tin hut where the workers had their swags. In the kitchen, he cut himself a thick slice of cured kangaroo meat and wet his dry throat with a long guzzle of tank water. Then he went to George Kane's raised stretcher bed and found the bottle of moonshine by a pair of old boots. And then he reached under his pillow to find the loaded 6-shot Enfield No. 2 revolver that he now picks up in 2 sweaty hands and holds between his knees as he sits on the thick log in front of the dying campfire. He takes a deep breath and he nods and walks to the 4 bodies lined up on the grass, and he lies flat on his back beside George Kane with the caved-in skull, and he looks up to the blue sky. There are 2 clouds up there, one fat and shaped like a wagon, and the other thin and stretched like a crocodile. The red-haired boy with half a left ear cocks the hammer on the revolver and breathes deep as he brings the barrel to his temple. He closes his eyes and his right forefinger slips cautiously over the trigger. He weeps and the tears squeeze through his closed eyelids. His mouth is closed and he screams through gritted teeth. A guttural howl, a lunatic wail, death-frenzied, life-crazed, but confused mostly. The finger on the trigger. Pull it, he tells himself. Be brave like George, he tells himself. He breathes deep again, but he can't pull the trigger. And he opens his eyes and is met by the face of a man looking down at him. Almost there, the man says. The boy screams in fear and raises the gun. Get away, he spits. I'll do you in, I will. I'll shoot your face right in. The man nods casually and steps away, and the boy watches him move to the campfire as he aims at his back. I mean you no harm, the man says. The man is tall and lean, a bushy black moustache over his lips, a white shirt covered in dirt and blood, black pants and boots, and a large black hat with a wide brim that shadows his face. Who are you? Shane spits. I'm the gravedigger, the man says, smelling the tea inside a cup he's found by the campfire logs. He slurps that tea down like it was made for him. Have you come to bury the bodies? The boy asks, because his mind moves slow and the man with the tea knows this already. No, I'm not here for these bodies, he says, now sipping the tea. But bodies are what I'm looking for. Are you one of them? The boy asks. Who's them? Then what done all this? The boy replies, casting his eyes over his dead friends in the human line. The man turns his eyes to the bodies. What happened here, boy? The boy speaks through tears. There were 2 girls, one younger and one older, he says. I saw them by the creek, and I ran back here and told my boss, George, about them, and then they came on through, and we gave him some tea and... The boy weeps. And? The man prompts, running his fingers across his left shoulder, where a bloodstain has seeped through his shirt. and the boys were going to have their way with the blonde woman, and my boss, George, he sent me down to the hut, but I didn't go all the way down. I hid behind them shrubs because I wanted to see them have their way, and then he came out of the forest.
Who came out of the forest, boy?
The ghost, the boy says. He moved like a ghost and crept up behind MacDougall and cut his throat open before I had a chance to say a word of warning, and I froze a bit, but my pecker didn't because it pissed in my pants, and I looked down and I saw my wet pants, and when I looked up again, that ghost had struck a sword inside George.
A sword? Echoes the man, intrigued. The boy cries hard now, the events rising together in a great wave of chilling reality. What did this ghost man look like?
He was Japanese, the boy says.
The man with the moustache shakes his head. Extraordinary, he says. He nods at the boy's left ear, where the blood is pooling in the worn rag dressing. What happened to your ear?
The younger girl was carrying a shovel, and she swung it at me and cut my ear fair in half, the boy says.
The man smiles beneath his moustache. And why would she do a thing like that? The boy shakes his head.
I was trying to grab hold of her.
Why were you grabbing hold of her?
We were gonna keep her here,
the boy says. The man nods. Then his eyes turn to the log by the campfire and find the bottle of moonshine the boy was just swigging from. The man's eyes light up as he throws his teacup in the fire. He picks up the bottle of moonshine, and the very touch of it makes him exhale with relief. The bottle has humbled him somehow. The boy watches the man sit on the large fireside log closest to him and remove his hat with what looks like exultation. The man smiles and holds the bottle up to the boy. You mind if I have a splash?
Go ahead, mister.
The boy could only sip that moonshine because it burned like liquid fire inside him. But the man puts that bottle to his dry and blistered lips and glugs down half of it in a single blast, his cheeks puffing like a bullfrog, his throat working hard like he's sucking on a water hose after a day's work in a wheat field. The man brings the bottle down and closes his eyes, breathing slow and deep. What's your name, boy?
Shane.
He opens his eyes again, turns to the boy. What were you going to do to the girl, Shane? The boy shakes his head.
No, I'm not going to tell you that.
You can tell me, the man says. Go ahead, Shane. I promise you no analysis, and I promise you no harm.
What?
Analysis, Shane, the man says, thinking on an event, then considering the meaning and the making of it. The boy thinks on this for a moment. He turns to George beside him. Then he speaks softly.
George said she was going to be my first.
The man nods. You were going to have your way with the girl. The boy drops his eyes, nodding. The man swigs from the bottle again. Tell me, Shane, what stopped you from pulling the trigger just now when you had that gun at the side of your head? Shane rests the gun in his lap now, sits up with his legs crossed.
I couldn't do it, he says. I kept thinking God was up there in the sky looking down on me, and he was going to send me to hell for doing it.
Why did you want to do it in the first place?
My friends have all gone, he says, and the world has ended and all that. And what do I have to stick around for now?
Who told you the world has ended?
George, the boy says, nodding at Kane.
He said that Hitler feller's running the north of the world now, and the Japs are running the south.
And I knew that was true when I saw the Jap come out of the forest like that.
The man nods, rubbing his moustache with his forefinger and thumb. He is silent for a long moment. It is true, Shane, the man says.
Firestorms have engulfed every major city of the world. There are no vehicles moving through streets anymore because the streets are filled with skinless bodies. Gravediggers across the world are naming their price for their highly valued services. Ash rains across the east coast of Australia. The Thames runs red with blood. German soldiers march through Times Square. The boy shakes his head, dismayed, but confused mostly. "George was going to start a new world here," he says. Shane lies back down beside George and weeps. The man looks to the sky and raises his bottle to it like a toast. Then he swigs again and turns to the boy. "Would you like to know the truth, Shane?" "Yes," says the boy. "The truth is, Shane," the man says, "God is not watching you. God has never bothered himself with the business of death. He only focuses on his successes and never bothers with his failures. He's always too concerned with the wonder of birth and the business of life. He lets death unravel down here with all the purpose and predictability of a father of 4 children tripping down a lighthouse stairwell. He cares for death about as much as the bullets in your gun care for bone. He makes no analysis of it, Shane. He has no interest in the meaning of it, nor the making. God knows nothing about death." He drinks again and points the bottle at the boy. "But the gravedigger, Shane. The gravedigger knows everything there is to know about death." And Aubrey Hook whispers now. "Let me tell you the story of a man who once passed through this way," he says. "Let me tell you the story of Tom Berry. It's a story about death." And here, in this godforsaken and blood-strewn tin mine campsite, Aubrey Hook's long story meanders haphazardly to a recollection the gravedigger has of the look upon Tom Berry's face when he stood in the workshed at Hollowwood Cemetery, reciting from a notepad the words he would like chiselled into his gravestone. Less an epitaph than a warning. An act of anger. An act of love. Tom Berry took Longcoat Bob's gold by horseback deep into the deep country from whence it had come. Then he put that gold back in the hole in the earth he had left behind. But the fortunes of the Berry family were not miraculously reversed. Tom Berry returned to Darwin from his fortnight-long journey to and from the deep country to find an inexplicable and unsettling melancholy spreading through his home. The hearts of the people he loved most, it seemed, were already turning cold in his presence, as if they were, indeed, already turning to stone. His wife seemed uninterested in his trip. In the ensuing months, she barely smiled at his humour, barely heard his comments on the weather and work and the welfare of his children. His son, Peter, had grown insular and detached and uncaring. His wife said early on that it was just the lingering sadness over the rash of impossible deaths that had struck the wider Berry family throughout the year. She wondered out loud one evening as she knitted a winter blanket if sadness was a contagion, as hazardous to heart and soul as smallpox was to mind and body. But then Bonnie Berry revealed her deeper feelings in the fireside heat of a living room row between husband and wife. She said the truth was that she resented her husband for putting Longcoat Bob's gold before their marriage. She hated him for his gold lust, and that had long ago overwhelmed his simple love of words and sentences. She resented him for being away so long in the deep country on that first fruitful and fateful trip. She said she had assumed he had died and she had steeled her heart for the worst kind of news, and when she saw him alive, she was dismayed to discover her heart did not soften back again. "I have no love for you, Tom," she bellowed across the living room. She held her chest, and she spoke like a devotee of Dickinson. "There is nothing in here for you." And Tom Berry drove his fist through his living room window, and a curving line of blood dripped down his forearm like the line he had etched on the back of his gold prospector's pan, the secret map of the route to Longcoat Bob's treasure, annotated with cryptic and clever words from a man who'd once prided himself on his way with them. That long walk through that strange and deep country recollected in a crooked line, the start and finish of all his failures. Then he realized that map he'd etched on his prospecting pan was not just a reminder of how to find his lost gold, should he ever wish to return to it, but also a way to hunt down Longcoat Bob. "I'll kill that Longcoat Bob!" Tom Berry screamed now, his own rage and regret and shame finally convincing him of the veracity of Longcoat Bob's command over black magic. And no matter how many times Bonnie Berry told her husband that her once warm heart had grown cold towards him long before any suggestion of a black man's curse upon their family, Tom Berry kept his shadow gaze on the sorcerer. And when he was told by his daughter, Violet, that she had fallen in love with and was surely going to marry Horace Hook, youngest son of Arthur Hook, it was Longcoat Bob he saw through the red mist of rage. When an outraged and immovable Tom Berry instructed his daughter to end the union, Violet left the family home and vowed never to return until her father accepted her love for Horace. "Anyone but a Hook," Tom Berry pleaded to the night sky. "Anyone but a son of Arthur Hook, his former best friend and gold mining partner, who had long despised Tom, and he had long despised in return. A man whose untimely death to a cave-in he had toasted in a solitary moment with a raised glass of Irish whiskey. When Tom Berry considered the implausibility of the union, the divine and impossible insult of it all, the union of all that he loved with all that he despised, he was convinced, in heart and soul and mind and body, that the curse of Longcoat Bob was real. And inside the cyclone's eye of their endless and bitter arguments over the estrangement of their daughter, Tom and Bonnie Berry failed to see the heart of their beloved son, Peter, growing as cold and hard and incapable of feeling as the hearts they carried inside themselves. At 6:55 a.m. on New Year's Day 1917, Bonnie Berry looked out her kitchen window to find her son, hanging from a branch of the milkwood tree Peter and Violet would lie beneath as children looking up at the sky. "You are the curse!" Bonnie screamed at her husband as she collapsed on the grass beneath the milkwood tree, a stretch of cut rope by her side and her son in her arms. "You are the curse, Tom Berry!" A large green caterpillar with red spots across its back walks in a body-looping fashion across Aubrey Hook's black right boot. He puts his arm down and allows the creature to roll its belly onto his hand and loop a walk along his knuckles. The red-haired boy, Shane, looks up at the blue sky that is turning with shifting cloud. "Was he really cursed?" the boy asks. "That depends what you mean by the word, Shane." "What happened to his wife?" "He found her 6 months later, hanging from that same milkwood tree," Aubrey says. "Violet had her buried in Hollowwood Cemetery, alongside one whole sorry row of berries. My brother and I buried her." "What happened to Tom?" "He became a recluse when his wife went," Aubrey Hook says, assessing how much drink is left inside the bottle. "He quarantined himself in his house.
He didn't want to get close to anyone in case Longcoat Bob's curse rubbed off on them. He'd chase people from the front gate, screaming like a madman, "Don't come any closer! Don't come any closer! Don't you know this place is damned?" The red-haired boy shakes his head in disbelief. Months before he died, Tom Berry knocked on the front door of the cemetery keeper's house at Hollowwood. He told his long-estranged daughter, Violet, that he was dying. His lungs were shot from breathing in all that rock dust in his dig days. It was with great reluctance that Tom Berry asked the sons of Arthur Hawke to give him a proper burial beside the grave of his wife. But he endured the conversation as a means to an eternal end beside the only woman he had ever truly loved. "And what would you like as your epitaph?" Aubrey Hooke asked Tom Berry in the Hollowwood Cemetery workshed. The men seated by a standing stack of grey headstones. "No epitaph," Tom Berry said. "Just a message." "How could one man be so unlucky?" asks the red-haired boy. "That's not the question you need to ask yourself, Shane," Aubrey Hooke says. "The question is, how could God allow such misery to fall on one man?" Aubrey Hooke caps the moonshine bottle and places it by his feet. He turns to the boy. "I know why you struggled to pull the trigger, Shane," he says. "It is a question not of God in the sky, but of value in your heart. No matter how miserable your life is, Shane, even to the point at which you have a loaded revolver placed against your temple, you have still found, deep within your heart, some inexplicable value in your existence. Usually, of course, the rippled complexity of your particular choice of ending is compounded by the phenomenon there are others in this world who have also placed inexplicable value upon your life. Parents, siblings, lovers. But in your case, boy, it appears the only people who placed any value whatsoever on your life are now lying in the dirt beside you. So, in turn, one can safely say that you are, to every living creature on this planet outside of yourself, completely and profoundly worthless. Therefore, I say to you, boy, if you have a lingering attachment to the earth and its people that is prohibiting you from pulling that trigger, you would be well advised to discard it. Which then leaves you to challenge only one remaining notion: that you inexplicably consider yourself, deep down in your heart, to be of some value. Aubrey holds the caterpillar on his hand out to the boy, whose wide eyes study the looping caterpillar, searching for a safe exit off the human platform. "Do you think God placed any more value upon you, Shane, than he did upon this caterpillar?" The red-haired boy rubs his eyes, ponders a response. "This caterpillar will transform soon into a glorious butterfly that will float high over rivers and flower beds, and if you saw it in flight, you might say to yourself that it was the prettiest sight your sore eyes had ever seen," Aubrey says. "But does that mean the caterpillar's life has more value than yours, Shane?" Shane shakes his head slowly. "No, it does not. Because we know, deep down in our hearts, that all of God's creatures, you, me, and my furry friend here, are of perfectly equal value. And by that I mean, Shane, we are all perfectly and profoundly worthless." The boy watches the caterpillar, and then he watches Aubrey casually lob it into the campfire, the creature roasting to a black ball within seconds. "Would you like me to help you?" Aubrey asks, soft and tender. The boy holds the gun in his hands. He considers the offer for a long moment. He hands the pistol to the man. "Thank you," the boy says. He lies back down beside the man he loved most in this turning world, the one-eyed giant named George Kane.
You just look on up to the sky, young Shane, Aubrey says. I will count backwards from 10, and if you want me to stop at any time, you just go ahead and sit up. The boy settles into place and nods his head, arms straight and flat by his side. 10, 9, 8, 7, Aubrey says, his right arm out and the pistol pointed at the boy's head. 6, 5, 4, the boy closing his eyes. 3, the gun's barrel the length of a hand away from the boy's temple. 2, the boy opening his eyes again to the blue sky. 1. Wait! Says the boy, and the gunshot echoes across the deep country. Dreams of love. Prove it, Nara, Yukio Miki says silently to the sky. Prove to me that this is not your plane of high heaven that I have parachuted into. For all I see is your paradise. There are things in this world down here so beautiful that they must have been made by you. The pilot runs his hand through a bed of vivid purple flowers and then to a thick grey eucalypt covered in so many hanging red and green figs they could form a dress for the tree, or a silk kimono. There are birds in the trees with orange breasts that glow like the setting sun and azure shoulders that shine like a blue moon. There are birds on the ground making homes for their lovers, and the homes are made only of curved twigs, but the homes have great archways, and the birds gather bright-coloured shells and flakes and stones, and they lay them at the entry to their houses in the hope that a lover might care to drop by. He finds a climbing vine with soft, round green leaves covered in fur, and from these leaves sprout lilac and white sepals, and from the purple base of those sepals rises a fountain of green and yellow petals, and from those petals emerges the fine and fragile shape of a woman dancing. The flowers style and stigma and anther. The woman's leg is raised, and her elbows are high, and her head is tilted, lost in the music that makes her move. And Yukio can see Nara in this high heaven flower. Prove it to me, Nara, Yukio Miki asks the sky. Prove it. Looks like a music box ballerina, Greta says, appearing at Yukio's side. It's beautiful. Yukio nods. He looks into Greta's eyes, and nothing he sees in her emerald iris galaxies serves to weaken his theory that he may have fallen into his own Takamonohara. Beautiful, he says. And Greta feels something strange and unsettling and tender passing from the pilot's eyes in that moment. So she turns away, and they walk together down a thin path that leads through tall trees and past thick walls of scrub. Molly walks 3 paces behind them, thinking about a story Yukio told her over breakfast. He spoke of it in broken English, but his flailing arms and finger gestures were enough to communicate its essentials to a girl so ready to hear it. The story of the assassin, known as the White Tiger, who came to Yukio's village all those years ago to meet the maker of a blade designed to cut the beating heart out of the very man who forged it. He spoke of the cemetery keeper who spent his life polishing the grave of his one true love. Molly wasn't sure if she got the story right, but she thinks the old man died, and when he died, he turned into a white butterfly and flew on up to heaven to be with his one true love, who was now the most beautiful butterfly in a sky full of butterflies. Molly knew that when he told this story, Yukio was thinking of his wife, Nara. That's why people tell stories, she thinks.
They remind us why we love things. They remind us why we love other people.
Molly is struck by a notion she wants to share with Yukio, so she rushes forward and wedges herself between her travelling companions.
I reckon that old man did turn into a butterfly, Yukio,
Molly says. Yukio nods. He chuckles to himself. Butterfly. In sky, he says.
It was like magic, Molly says. And I was thinking, Yukio, that what Longcoat Bob did to my grandfather was a kind of magic too. But it was bad magic. And if there's bad magic, then there's got to be good magic too.
Good magic. Yukio nods. He likes the thought of it.
Good magic like turning the people we care about into butterflies when they die, Molly says. But there's something I don't understand about the story, Yukio.
Yukio slows. He turns his head down to Molly. Molly, no understand?
Yeah, Molly says. I don't understand why he turned into a butterfly. Why turn him into something that's only going to die a few days later?
Yukio stops on the spot, and the travelling party stops with him. He kneels down before Molly. No, Molly Hook, he says with a knowingly theatrical hint of the mystique. Butterfly, short life. But butterfly, see all world. Butterfly, love all world. Butterfly, short time, no lose time. He raises his arms to the trees around him, and the insects in those trees, and the sun over their heads. He beams as he turns his head across all of the life he sees before him. Butterfly knows way, he says. Butterfly see everything, tree, sky. He points at the sun. San, he says in his native tongue. He points at a log by the side of the path. Udo, he says. Greta watches him closely. She sees the way he speaks, like every thought was formed in his soul, and every word was ink-pressed in blood from his heart. He points at two birds circling each other in the sky. Bird, he says, water, air, light. He points at Molly. Butterfly see you, Molly Hook. Molly smiles. Butterfly short life, Yukio says, but butterfly live forever. He raises a single forefinger. In one day. Molly nods appreciatively, eyes wide and awed. The trio press on. Silence for 2 full minutes. Then Molly breaks the silence. Molly always breaks the silence.
That's like you and Nara, she says, looking straight ahead, speaking words as they come to her. You only had a short time, but she could give you everything.
She knows now that the words she is saying are for herself.
In one day.
This is why people tell stories, she thinks. Yukio nods. His head turns to the ground, and Greta can see the pain inside him, and she wants to move 3 steps to the side and wrap her arms around that strange pilot's shoulders. But that's a move for different worlds, softer worlds than this one. Molly Hook understand, Yukio says softly. Hot air and humidity. Greta rubs the sweat from the back of her neck and uses it to wash dirt from her hands and face. Molly is still pressing on quick and hard, walking alone some 30 yards ahead of them. Yukio quickens his walking pace to catch up to Greta's left shoulder. Bob, Yukio says. Yeah, Greta says, shaking her head as she plods along. Longcoat Bob, the magic man. Magic, Yukio says. You believe. Greta gives a half smile, shrugs her shoulders. Not really, she says. Why you come? Yukio asks. Why come far? I don't really know, Greta says. She nods at Molly. Ahead of them, just at the moment she mistimes her step over a fallen branch. She trips, but plants a steadying foot to stop herself from falling flat on her face. Someone had to keep her out of trouble. You want gold? Yukio ponders. Well, I wouldn't say no to it. They walk in silence. Aisuru, Yukio says. Huh? Aisuru, Yukio repeats. He nods at Molly. You, Molly. And he puts his hand on his heart and pats it 4 times like it's beating. Aisuru. Love, Greta suggests. The first word of English his father did not learn. Love, he smiles. You love Molly. Greta smiles, considers that notion. Like child, Yukio adds. Greta is taken aback by the comment, but she shrugs it off with a nervous chuckle. Her eyes return to Molly ahead, off the path now, inspecting something she's seen beneath a broad-leafed paperbark tree. Well, yeah, I care about the kid, but I'm not about to stick her photograph in my purse, Greta says. Girl, want mother, Yukio says. Girl, love Greta. Greta speaks more sharply this time. I don't think for a second she's my child, if that's what you're saying, she says. The girl's got a mother. It's just a shame she's 6 foot under. Yukio is bright enough to tune to the frequency of anger in her voice, despite his inability to understand all of her words.
Hey, Yukio!
Hollers Molly, running back to her fellow wanderers, one hand holding Bert and the other holding a black rhinoceros beetle in her hand.
You have these in Japan?
She holds the beetle up to Yukio's eyes, and this armoured tank of an insect hisses with the rough house handling. Oh, Yukio says, leaning back with a show of great respect to the insect. We have Japan, but... Then he brings his hand to his face and makes the shape of a long horn extending from his nose.
Like,
he says, and he puts his lips together, and he blows hard with his puffed cheeks, and his fingers play a brass instrument as his feet dance on an imaginary stage.
Trumpet,
Molly says.
They have trumpets on their heads in Japan.
Yukio nods.
How about that?
Molly says, chuffed by the knowledge.
You have trumpets in Japan.
Ha! Yukio smiles, jumping into a rousing trumpet number played through his thumb.
You have good music in Japan?
Molly asks.
You have songs?
He nods enthusiastically. Song, he says, and he starts to sing as he skips down the path. Getsu, getsu, kaisu, moku, kin, kin, he sings, and he makes the song sound so joyous, despite the song's content and title, speaking of the restless drudgery that comes with being a member of the Imperial Japanese Navy.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Molly joins in the singing, and they link arms as they spin around Greta, who rolls her eyes.
Hey, Greta Mays,
Molly beams, stomping her legs in the path's dirt.
Sing Yukio a song.
Molly turns to Yukio.
She's some canary when she gets going, Yukio. Wait till you hear her voice. Go on, Greta.
Molly spins on Yukio's arm now, and her head flies back, and her eyes go to the sky.
Sing him a song about the sky, Greta,
Molly laughs. It never takes much for Greta Mays to see a spotlight turned on her, and Yukio watches her make her transformation from sweaty wanderer to one-show-only Carnegie Hall sell-out torch singer lit up by the lights. And Greta hits a perfect high note, a voice that is pure Cotton Club, pure Harlem 1933, pure jazz and blues and pure martini. It's not a song about the sky. It's a song about the weather. It's a song about the rain, and Molly and Yukio stop spinning, and they start marvelling, lost in the corridors of Greta Maze. A weepy torch song about hearts breaking and storms coming. And Yukio can't understand a word of what she's singing, but he follows every beat of her big heart. Greta smiles as she spins under the spotlight, waves to her audience, to some folks deep in the back row. She winks at Molly, and Molly waves back. She raises her palm to the stage lights. She sings about the darkness in them all, in men and women, in lovers. But all Yukio Miki sees around her is light. And the actress knows he sees that. She stares at him now when she sings because she's never had an audience like this. A face in the crowd so spellbound. A face so full of devotion, protection, loyalty, and maybe something else. She sings of wild black storms, but all Yukio Miki sees is sunshine. And she saves her last word and her last look from the stage for the pilot who fell from the sky. And he understands that last word of her song. He can translate it, and that word is drawn from the end point in the maze of Greta Maze. And what's waiting at the end of that maze is that last word, and that word is together. Molly claps loudly, "Bravo! Bravo!" And Greta Maze bows to her imaginary audience, and Yukio Miki wants to open his mouth, but he's frozen stiff. And what use has he for a mouth anyway, when no kind of mouth, not Japanese or English or French or whoop-whoop, could ever convey his desire to hear her sing an encore, or how good it feels to know what high heaven sounds like. Silence now, in a bushed cathedral of trees where little light gets in. Molly walks ahead, Greta behind her, then Yukio. Darkness in the deep country and a narrow dirt track running deeper into the dense wilderness. "Do you hear that?" Greta asks, stopping. Molly and Yukio stop with her. "Hear what?" asks Molly. "The sound of cicadas. A bird whistle." "Never mind," Greta says. They walk on through ferns and rambling monsoon forest climbers. Greta stops again. "You hear that?" "Hear what?" Molly asks. "Piano keys," Greta says. But Molly doesn't register what Greta says because she has spotted a fork in the path ahead. And she runs to it because she can see something flashing among a stand of trees where the path splits in two. One path turning west around the trees, and the other turning east. The forest is dark, but dappled light shimmers through it when the wind blows, and then shadows move across the strange cluster of 7 grey-brown trees standing almost 60 feet high. Molly walks over to the trunk of the largest of the trees and caresses its majestic torso with skin like a tessellated mosaic of thick bark fragments that took some reclusive and fine forest artisan a decade to create. Her fingers find wounds in the tree, and she notices that these wounds, like bullet holes or puncture wounds from thrown spears, are on all the trees at this strange junction. And from these wounds run thin rivers of blood. She runs her forefinger along one river of blood and realizes it has hardened to a waxy substance, like something her father would have used to seal an envelope. The tree blood has stained the trunks of the towering natives. "Out, damned spot. Out, I say," Molly recites to herself. She digs out her gold pan, studies her grandfather's secret words, Tom Berry's etched notes to self. Then she calls to Greta and Yukio. "West, where the yellow fork man leads. East in the dark when the wood bleeds." She looks down the eastern path, a thin animal track winding through thick forest. She looks down the western path, a thin animal track winding through thick forest.
We go this way,
Molly says, excitedly peering down the eastern path. Yukio nods, but Greta seems preoccupied. She's looking up at the forest ceiling, a dense roof of palms like ship sails and branches that stretch and probe through all that green, the way a jellyfish's tentacles stretch through oceans. "Can you hear that?" she asks. "It's faint." She looks down the western path. "It's music." But the faces of Molly and Yukio say they can't hear it, and Greta wonders if she's hearing things because she's tired, and her stomach has been empty for the past 6 hours, and her mind has been ravaged by war and monsters. But there it is again. Music. The faintest sound of music. Piano. She wants to say a word out loud, but she holds that word in. A word from her childhood. A German word her father said. Lieberstrom.
Greta,
Molly says.
this way, come on!
And Molly skips down the thin path, heading east, and the pilot and the actress follow. But then, she stops on the spot.
Wait, I hear something too, she says, but it's not music.
She listens harder to the forest, her right ear up to the sprawling green canopy. It's a waterfall. This is the end of CD 9. The book continues on CD 10.